an Israeli Air Force F-35I Adir dropped below 200 feet over the Persian Gulf, 40 miles south of Bandar Abbas, and released a payload that had never been used in combat before. The pilot didn't see the target. He didn't need to. The aircraft's mission computer had already confirmed coordinates transmitted from a source the pilot would never be briefed on, locked the weapon, and initiated release sequencing before the jet even crossed into Iranian airspace. The weapon fell for 11 seconds. Then its engine ignited and it disappeared from the pilot's heads-up display entirely. He pulled into a 7G climbing turn back toward tanker airspace. His part was done. The weapon's part was just beginning. 6 seconds later, 190 miles to the north, an operator at Iran's Karg Island oil terminal noticed something unusual on his monitoring screen. A pressure reading in the main crude distribution manifold had dropped by 4%. He noted it in his log. He assumed it was a sensor fault. Karg Island processes roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. On a normal day, 5 million barrels pass through its loading systems. This was not going to be a normal day. 1,200 miles to the west, at Nevatim Air Base in the Negev Desert, the operations center was running at full capacity. 47 personnel occupied stations in a room roughly the size of a basketball court. The air smelled like coffee and static electricity. 3 screens along the far wall displayed feeds from assets the Israeli Air Force doesn't publicly acknowledge having in theater. One of them showed a live infrared image of Karg Island from 62,000 feet. The operator watching it said nothing. He just marked a timestamp. 2:14 and 31 seconds. 700 miles southeast, in the waters off Fujairah, 3 commercial supertankers sat at anchor waiting for loading schedules. Each one carried roughly 2 million barrels of capacity. Each one was empty. They had been empty for 11 days. The shipping companies that owned them had received quiet advisories from their insurance underwriters to delay Persian Gulf transits. No reason was given. No reason needed to be. When Lloyd's of London tells you to wait, you wait. And in Washington, D.C., where it was still 5:14 in the evening of the previous day, a statement had been drafted but not yet released. The statement concerned the Strait of Hormuz. It contained exactly one sentence that would rearrange global oil markets within hours of its publication. The sentence had been reviewed by the National Security Council, the Secretary of Defense, and the President himself. It read in part, that the United States would consider any hostile interdiction of commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz as an act requiring immediate and proportional military response. The word proportional was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. It was about to do more. Back over the Persian Gulf, the weapon released from the F-35I had covered 140 miles in just under 4 minutes. It was a variant of the Rampage air-to-surface missile, a supersonic precision munition with a range of approximately 190 miles and a warhead designed not for blast damage but for structural penetration. Think of a telephone pole made of tungsten and high explosive moving at Mach 2.4. It doesn't need to destroy everything. It just needs to hit the right thing. At 2:18 local time, it hit the right thing. The target was not a military installation. It was not a nuclear facility. It was not a government building. It was a 36-inch high-pressure crude oil pipeline junction at the southern edge of Karg Island's Tank Farm No. 3. This junction connected the main export pipeline to 3 of the island's 6 single-point mooring buoys, the floating loading stations where tankers connect to take on crude. Without this junction, those 3 buoys were dead metal in the water. Half of Karg Island's export capacity disappeared in a moment measured in milliseconds. The explosion itself was modest. A flash. A pressure wave that broke windows in a control building 400 meters away. Then a fire that burned at 1,100 degrees for the next 14 hours. The operator who had noted the pressure drop 4 minutes earlier now had a very different problem on his screen. He wasn't looking at a sensor fault. He was looking at zero flow across the entire southern distribution network. He reached for the emergency communications panel. The line was dead. That wasn't an accident. 70 seconds before the Rampage missile reached its target, an Israeli cyber operation that had been dormant inside Karg Island's communications infrastructure for an estimated 19 months activated a prepositioned payload. It didn't destroy the communication system. That would have been obvious and quickly repaired. Instead, it introduced a 5,000 millisecond delay on all outgoing signals from the island's primary and secondary communications nodes. 5 seconds. That doesn't sound like much. In the next 90 minutes, it would be enough. 320 miles to the northwest, a second strike was arriving. This one came from the Mediterranean. 2 Israeli F-15I RAM aircraft operating from a position over northern Syria had launched 4 Delilah cruise missiles 12 minutes earlier. The Delilah is slower than the Rampage, subsonic, about 600 miles per hour. But it has a capability the Rampage doesn't. It can loiter. It can circle a target area for up to 30 minutes, waiting for updated targeting data before committing to its final attack run. These 4 Delilahs were not circling. They were inbound and locked. Their target was the Abadan oil refinery complex in southwestern Iran, one of the oldest and most important refineries in the country. Abadan processes 400,000 barrels of crude per day. It sits on the Shat al-Arab waterway, 11 miles from the Iraqi border. The Delilahs were coming in from the west, below 100 feet, following the river. Iranian air defense coverage in Khuzestan province is dense. On paper, the province hosts 3 battalions of S-300 PMU-2 long-range surface-to-air missile systems, 2 batteries of Bavar 373 indigenous air defense systems, and multiple short-range point defense installations. On any other night, detecting 4 subsonic cruise missiles crossing the border at low altitude would have been difficult but possible, given the radar coverage overlaps designed into the network. On this night, it was impossible. Because at 2:11 local time, 3 minutes before the first Rampage hit Karg Island, every early warning radar in a 200-mile radius of Abadan experienced what would later be described as a catastrophic synchronization failure. This was the second cyber operation, and it was significantly more aggressive than the first. Rather than introducing delays, this payload attacked the timing protocols that allow multiple radar installations to coordinate their coverage and hand off tracking data between stations. Without synchronized timing, each radar station still functioned individually. Each one could still detect objects in its own sector. But none of them could talk to each other. And none of them could pass targeting data to the missile batteries that depended on that information to engage threats. Each radar operator saw pieces of the picture. None of them saw all of it. The 4 Delilahs threaded through the gaps like water through a cracked dam. At 2:22 local time, the first Delilah struck the main atmospheric distillation column at Abadan's Unit 2 processing facility. The second hit the adjacent crude desalting plant. The third struck a 200,000-barrel floating roof storage tank. The fourth missed its intended target by 40 meters and detonated on a maintenance road. The first 3 were enough. Within 6 minutes, fires were burning across an area the size of 4 football fields. Secondary explosions in the desalting plant sent burning hydrocarbons into the drainage system that fed into the Shat al-Arab waterway. A black cloud visible from Basra, Iraq, 30 miles away, began to climb. 600 miles to the east, Iran's response was already in motion. But it was the wrong response. At 2:16, 2 minutes after the Karg Island strike, Iran's Supreme National Security Council received initial reports of an explosion on the island. The information was fragmentary because of the communications delay. But the SNSC had anticipated an Israeli strike against its nuclear program for months. Every contingency plan, every prepositioned response, every retaliatory option was built around that assumption. The assumption was that any Israeli attack would target Natanz, Isfahan, or Fordow. The nuclear triad. Every wargame they had run, every scenario they had planned for, started with those 3 locations. At 2:19, a duty officer in Tehran ordered a general air defense alert across all nuclear-associated facilities. S-300 batteries at Natanz powered to full readiness. Bavar 373 units at Isfahan began sweep scanning. Fighter squadrons at Mehrabad and Tabriz were ordered to immediate alert status. Within 12 minutes, Iran had its most sophisticated air defense umbrella active and scanning. It was covering the wrong targets. No Israeli aircraft were within 400 miles of any nuclear facility. That was the point. 1,200 miles from Tehran, aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower operating in the Gulf of Oman, the Carrier Strike Group's intelligence center was watching everything. They weren't participating. Not yet. Their role, for now, was to observe and to maintain a posture that the Pentagon described internally as conspicuous readiness. The Eisenhower had 2 squadrons of F divided by a -18E divided by F Super Hornets, a squadron of EA-18G Growlers electronic warfare aircraft, and an air wing that had been at elevated readiness for 9 days. Conspicuous readiness meant that Iranian intelligence could see the carrier group, could see its aircraft on the flight deck, could detect the electronic emissions of a strike group preparing for operations. It was meant to be visible. It was meant to create doubt. If Iran retaliated against Israel, would the Americans join? The answer was supposed to be unclear. Unclear is more powerful than certain. What Iran's intelligence services could not see was what was 200 miles behind the Eisenhower. 3 Ohio-class guided missile submarines. Each one carrying 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. That's 462 cruise missiles in a space roughly the size of a small parking lot. sitting quietly at 400 feet below the surface of the Arabian Sea. They had been in position for 6 days. They had received no launch orders. They had received one message, repeated daily for the last 4 days. 4 words: maintain current posture, stand by. Back in Washington, the statement about the Strait of Hormuz was released at 5:47 p.m. Eastern Time. Within 11 minutes, Brent crude futures spiked $14 per barrel. Within 30 minutes, the spike hit $22. Trading algorithms that had been watching for keywords including Hormuz, military response, and proportional triggered automated buying across every major commodity exchange simultaneously. By the time human traders at the London IC exchange started their morning 6 hours later, oil was at $127 per barrel and climbing. 24 hours earlier it had been at $89.
This was Story 1.
Israeli strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure. American threats regarding the Strait. A regional crisis with global energy implications. Every news network on the planet was running this story by 3 a.m. local time. Satellites were being repositioned. Analysts were being woken up. Retired generals were sitting in studio chairs explaining what they thought would happen next. What they didn't know was that the oil infrastructure was the distraction. The real operation had started 11 hours earlier, at 3 p.m. local time on the previous afternoon, and it had nothing to do with missiles, aircraft, or pipelines. At 3:02 p.m. the previous day, an Iranian-flagged container ship named the Shari Cord, a 40,000-ton vessel operating a regular route between Bandar Abbas and the port of Latakia in Syria, suffered what its crew reported as a catastrophic engine room failure approximately 15 miles inside the Strait of Hormuz.
The vessel lost propulsion. It began to drift.
The crew deployed an emergency anchor in one of the most congested shipping channels on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest point is 21 miles wide. The shipping lanes used by tanker traffic are 2 miles wide in each direction, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone. A 40,000-ton ship sitting dead in the water in one of those lanes is the maritime equivalent of a jackknifed tractor trailer on a 2-lane highway. Traffic began to stack up almost immediately. By 4 p.m., 6 tankers were holding positions south of the disabled vessel, waiting for tugs. By 6 p.m., the number was 14. By midnight, 23 commercial vessels of various types were either holding position, diverting around the obstruction, or anchored in designated waiting areas. Iranian port authorities at Bandar Abbas offered tug assistance. The tugs arrived at 7:30 p.m. They connected lines. They attempted to move the Shari Cord.
The ship didn't budge.
The tugs reported that the vessel's anchor chain appeared to be fouled on something on the seabed. The anchor couldn't be retrieved.
The ship couldn't be towed.
Nobody in any Western intelligence service flagged this as unusual. Container ships break down. Anchors get fouled. It happens. The Strait of Hormuz experiences an average of 3 significant shipping disruptions per month.
This was routine.
Annoying but routine. It was not routine. The Shari Cord's engine room failure had been manufactured. The anchor was not fouled on the seabed. It was functioning exactly as intended. The ship's purpose was not to transit to Latakia. Its purpose was to sit precisely where it was sitting for precisely as long as it was sitting there. Because directly beneath the Shari Cord, on the floor of the strait at a depth of 80 meters, sat something that had been placed there 14 weeks earlier by an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy midget submarine.
It was a mine.
But not a conventional naval mine. It was a rising mine, a weapon that sits on the seabed and upon activation, releases a torpedo that ascends to intercept a target passing overhead. This particular variant was the EM-52, a Chinese-designed system that Iran had been suspected of possessing since 2015 but had never confirmed. The EM-52 can engage targets in water up to 200 meters deep. Its torpedo component has a range of approximately 10 miles. There wasn't just one. There were 6. Spaced at 1,500-meter intervals along the shipping lanes. The Shari Cord was sitting on top of one of them, not because the ship was part of the mine deployment, but because the ship's position was intended to force tanker traffic into a predictable diversion pattern. When ships can't use the normal channel, they use the alternate channel. The alternate channel ran directly over 4 of the other 5 mines. It was a kill box, and 23 ships were slowly being herded into it. The American statement about the strait was not a coincidence. It was based on intelligence. 96 hours earlier, a signals intelligence platform operating from a facility in Bahrain had intercepted a burst transmission from a known IRGC Navy command node to 3 fast attack craft bases along the Iranian coast. The transmission was encrypted, but its structure matched a pattern that NSA analysts had catalogued 4 years earlier during a previous escalation. The pattern was associated with mine warfare activation.
Not deployment. Activation.
The mines were already in the water. What the transmission ordered was the arming sequence. A second intercept, from a different source, provided partial geographic coordinates. Those coordinates were in the Strait of Hormuz. They were verified within 12 hours by an underwater drone launched from a Virginia-class submarine operating in the Gulf of Oman. The drone, an autonomous system called Razorback, covered 45 miles of seabed and returned with sonar imagery confirming 6 bottom-mounted objects consistent with EM-52 mine profiles. That intelligence went from Bahrain to CENTCOM in Tampa to the Pentagon to the White House in less than 4 hours. The presidential statement about the strait was drafted the same day. The timing of its release, simultaneous with the Israeli strikes, was not a coincidence either.
It was coordinated. Not publicly. Not formally.
Through a channel that doesn't appear in any organizational chart. So there were now 2 crises unfolding simultaneously, and most of the world only knew about one of them. The visible crisis was the Israeli strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure.
Karg Island burning. Abadan burning.
Oil prices climbing. That crisis was loud, photogenic, and impossible to ignore. The invisible crisis was 6 mines in the Strait of Hormuz, a dead container ship sitting on top of one of them, and 23 vessels slowly repositioning into a pattern that would give Iran the ability to shut down 21% of the world's daily oil supply in under 3 minutes. In Tehran, the Supreme National Security Council was in emergency session.
The room was divided.
The strikes on Karg Island and Abadan were an act of war. There was no ambiguity about that. The damage to Karg alone would reduce Iran's oil export capacity by an estimated 40% for a minimum of 6 months. Abadan would take longer. The economic impact was staggering. Iran's oil revenue for the current fiscal year was projected at approximately $50 billion. 40% of export capacity gone meant roughly $20 billion in lost revenue. Annual. For at least a year. The math was not complicated. The IRGC commander present in the session argued for immediate activation of the Strait contingency. The mines were armed. The fast attack craft were loaded with anti-ship missiles. 62 missile boats, each carrying 2 to 4 C-802 anti-ship cruise missiles, were dispersed along the Iranian coastline between Bandar Abbas and Jask. The total missile count exceeded 200. Against commercial shipping, those numbers were overwhelming. Tankers don't have countermeasures. They don't maneuver. They're 1,000-foot steel boxes moving at 15 knots. Even a 20% hit rate would mean 40 missiles finding targets. The strait would be closed within hours. Oil would hit $200 per barrel. Maybe $250. The economic damage to the West would dwarf what Israel had just done to Iran. The foreign minister argued the opposite. The American statement had changed the calculus. Closing the strait would not trigger an American diplomatic protest. It would trigger a military response. And unlike previous administrations that had drawn red lines and then negotiated around them, this White House had positioned assets that made the threat credible. The Eisenhower strike group was visible. The statement was public. The word proportional gave the Americans legal and political cover to do almost anything. What the foreign minister didn't know, and what the IRGC commander didn't know, was what was 200 miles behind the Eisenhower. Those 3 Ohio-class submarines. 462 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Proportional is an interesting word when you have 462 cruise missiles available. The debate in Tehran lasted 47 minutes. The decision was to activate Phase 1 of the Strait contingency but not Phase 2. Phase 1 meant the fast attack craft would deploy from their bases and take up pre-assigned positions along the coast, visible to American surveillance, creating a threat posture. The mines would remain armed but not triggered. Phase 2, the actual mining and missile attacks on shipping, would be held in reserve as a deterrent. The logic was that the threat of closing the strait was almost as powerful as actually closing it, and significantly less likely to result in an American attack. It was a reasonable calculation. It had one flaw. The flaw was that Israel already knew about Phase 1. They knew because the communications network that carried the SNSC's orders to IRGC Navy Command was compromised. Not the encryption. The metadata. Israeli signals intelligence didn't know what the order said, but they knew when they were sent, from where, to whom, and the response patterns they generated. When 62 missile boats began leaving their berths within 20 minutes of the SNSC session ending, the pattern matched what Israeli intelligence had predicted for a strait closure posture. At 3:40 local time, roughly 90 minutes after the first strike on Karg Island, the Israeli operation entered its second phase. This phase had no missiles, no aircraft, and no explosions. It was conducted entirely in the electromagnetic spectrum. 4 Israeli Gulfstream G550 aircraft modified for signals intelligence and electronic warfare, known as the Nakhon Shavat and Nakhon item, had been orbiting in a racetrack pattern over the Red Sea at 41,000 feet since midnight. They had been silent until now. At 3:40, all 4 aircraft activated their electronic warfare suites simultaneously. The effect was immediate. Iranian naval communications along the entire southern coastline degraded by approximately 70%. The 62 fast attack craft that had just deployed from their bases suddenly couldn't talk to their command authority with any reliability. Some lost communications entirely. Others received garbled fragments. The boats were designed to operate independently if necessary, but their commanders had trained for a coordinated missile saturation attack. Without coordination, each boat was a single unit with 2 to 4 missiles. Individually, they were annoying. Collectively, they were devastating. Israel had just turned collectively into individually. At the same time, 400 miles to the east, something happened that nobody in Tehran or Jerusalem had planned for. The Shari cord, the container ship sitting dead in the Strait of Hormuz, moved. Not because the tugs pulled it free. Because its anchor chain broke. Or more precisely, because the anchor chain was cut. A U.S. Navy explosive ordnance disposal team operating from a rigid hull inflatable boat that had been staged from the USS Nitsa, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer operating nearby, had placed a small shaped charge on the anchor chain at a depth of 30 meters. The charge detonated at 3:38 local time.
The chain parted.
The tugs, which were still connected, immediately began towing the now-free vessel south, out of the shipping lane. Within 20 minutes, the Shari cord was clear. Traffic could resume through the normal channel. The normal channel that did not run over the mines. The Iranians recognized what had happened almost immediately. The anchor chain didn't break on its own. The timing, 2 minutes before the Israeli electronic warfare activation, was not a coincidence. Someone had coordinated this. The Shari cord gambit was burned. But the mines were still in the water. And the mines were still armed. In Tampa, at CENTCOM headquarters, the mine problem was now the priority. 6 EM, 52 rising mines in the world's most important shipping choke point. Each one capable of killing a supertanker. The standard approach to mine clearance is methodical. You send mine countermeasure vessels, MH-53EC Dragon helicopters towing minesweeping gear, unmanned underwater vehicles to locate and neutralize each mine individually.
It takes days. Sometimes weeks.
The strait couldn't be closed for weeks. Every day of closure cost the global economy roughly $2.5 billion. The non-standard approach was faster.
And riskier.
At 4:15 local time, AP-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft operating from Naval Support Activity Bahrain arrived over the strait at 25,000 feet. It was carrying sonobuoys, expendable underwater sensors that could be dropped from the aircraft to create an acoustic picture of the seabed. Over the next 40 minutes, the Poseidon dropped 36 sonobuoys in a grid pattern covering the area identified by the Razorback drone's earlier survey. The sonobuoy data was relayed in real time to the Nitsa, which had the most advanced mine warfare software package in the strike group. Simultaneously, 2 MH-60S Seahawk helicopters launched from the Eisenhower carrying airborne mine neutralization systems, essentially remote-controlled underwater vehicles with explosive charges that could be guided to a mine and detonated. Each helicopter carried 2 neutralization vehicles.
4 vehicles. 6 mines.
The math wasn't perfect. 50 miles to the south, a second underwater drone was launched from the Virginia-class submarine. This one wasn't mapping. It was carrying 4 lightweight charges specifically designed for bottom mine neutralization. The drone's transit time to the minefield was estimated at 90 minutes.
Too long for the first pass.
The helicopters would have to do what they could with 4 vehicles and hope the submarine's drone arrived in time for the remaining mines. At 4:55 local time, the first airborne mine neutralization vehicle reached its target. The mine was sitting in 75 meters of water, partially buried in silt. The neutralization vehicle positioned itself within 2 meters of the mine and detonated. The explosion was felt on the surface as a dull thump. Sonobuoy data confirmed the mine was destroyed.
1 down, 5 to go.
The second vehicle reached its target at 5:03. Successful detonation.
2 down.
The third vehicle experienced a guidance malfunction at 5:10 and drifted off course. The operator on the Seahawk attempted to regain control. The vehicle's battery died at 5:14. It sank to the seabed, useless. 3 vehicles expended.
2 mines destroyed. 1 failed.
The fourth and final vehicle was deployed at 5:18 toward the third mine. Successful detonation at 5:24. 3 mines neutralized. 3 remaining. The helicopters had nothing left. The submarine drone was still 40 minutes out.
40 minutes.
In those 40 minutes, 3 armed mines sat in the shipping lanes of the Strait of Hormuz. 3 mines that could each destroy a supertanker. 3 mines that the Iranian IRGC Navy still had the ability to trigger remotely. And in Tehran, the argument about Phase 2 was starting again. The IRGC commander now had new information. The Americans had moved the Shari cord. The Americans were actively clearing the mines. The Iranian contingency was being dismantled in real time. If Phase 2 was going to happen, it needed to happen now, before the remaining mines were neutralized. The window was closing. 62 missile boats were in position, though many had degraded communications. The 3 remaining mines were armed and could be command detonated. The foreign minister's counter-argument was simpler now. The Americans were clearing the mines. That meant the Americans knew about the mines. That meant the American threat about the strait was not hypothetical. It was operational. If Iran triggered those mines or launched anti-ship missiles at commercial shipping, the response would not be a statement. It would be 462 Tomahawk cruise missiles. And those would not be aimed at oil infrastructure. They would be aimed at every IRGC Navy base, every missile storage facility, every command center, and every fast attack craft that could be located. The IRGC Navy would cease to exist as a functional force in approximately 90 minutes. There was also the question of China. China buys roughly 27% of Iran's oil exports. China had not been consulted about the strait contingency. China would not appreciate having its energy supply interrupted by an Iranian decision made in the heat of a crisis. Beijing's ambassador had already called twice. He had not been put through to anyone with decision-making authority. That was a mistake that would have consequences regardless of what happened in the next hour. At 5:45 local time, with dawn beginning to lighten the eastern horizon over the Gulf of Oman, the SNSC reached its second decision. Phase 2 would not be activated. The remaining mines would be left in place as a card to be played later, but not triggered. The fast attack craft were ordered to return to port. The strait would remain open. Iran would pursue its response through other channels.
Diplomatic, economic,
Asymmetric. The IRGC commander left the session without speaking to anyone. His deputy, waiting in an anteroom, asked him what had been decided.
He said one sentence.
It wasn't recorded, but it was reported later by 3 separate sources with minor variations. The version most commonly cited translates roughly to, "We just paid $50 billion to learn that our Navy is a suggestion." He wasn't entirely wrong. The 62 missile boats were returning to port. The electronic warfare jamming from the Israeli Gulfstream aircraft had lifted once the boats began withdrawing, which confirmed for the IRGC that the jamming had been targeted and deliberate, not some broad-spectrum interference. The Israelis had known exactly which frequencies to hit. That meant they had been listening for a very long time. At 6:04 local time, the submarine-launched underwater drone reached the 4th mine. Successful neutralization.
At 6:22, the 5th.
At 6:41, the 6th and final mine was destroyed. The Strait of Hormuz was clear. The entire mine neutralization operation had taken 1 hour and 46 minutes from first vehicle deployment to last detonation. The standard timeline for clearing a minefield of that size in a contested environment was 5 to 8 days. CENTCOM's after-action report would later describe the operation as compressed but acceptable. An unofficial assessment from the EOD team that cut the Shari cord's anchor chain used different language. They called it stupid lucky. Back in the daylight, the visible damage was becoming clear. Satellite imagery of Karg Island showed a fire burning across the southern tank farm with a smoke plume extending 40 miles downwind. The pipeline junction was destroyed. 3 of 6 loading buoys were inoperable. Iranian emergency crews were on scene but struggling to contain the fire because the water supply system for the firefighting infrastructure drew from a pumping station that had been damaged by debris from the initial strike. A $3.2 million missile had knocked out a pipeline junction, 3 loading buoys, a control building, and a firefighting pumping station. Total estimated repair cost, $1.4 billion. Estimated repair time, 8 to 14 months.
Abadan was worse.
The atmospheric distillation column is the heart of any refinery. Without it, crude oil is just crude oil. It can't be processed into gasoline, diesel, kerosene, or any other usable product. Abadan's Unit 2 distillation column was a total loss. The desalting plant was a total loss. The storage tank would burn for another 9 days before it consumed all available fuel. Repair estimates for Abadan ranged from $2.1 billion to $3.6 billion depending on which engineering assessment you trusted. Timeline, 18 months to 3 years.
4 missiles had hit Abadan.
3 of them found their targets. Total missile cost, approximately $4.8 million. The damage they inflicted would cost at least $2 billion to repair and remove billions more in refining capacity from the market for years. The cost ratio was not lost on analysts. $1 million of Israeli munitions had purchased roughly $400 million of Iranian economic damage. That ratio would appear in every defense procurement brief for the next decade. On global markets, the picture was equally dramatic. By 8 a.m. London time, Brent crude had reached $134 per barrel. By noon, it touched $141 before settling back to $136 on reports that the strait remained open. The strait remaining open was the only thing preventing a complete market panic. If those 6 mines had been triggered, if even one supertanker had been hit, the model showed oil reaching $200 within 48 hours and $250 within a week. The global economic impact of a sustained strait closure was estimated at $4 trillion annualized. The mines that prevented that scenario had cost approximately $12 million to manufacture and deploy. The neutralization vehicles, submarine drones, sonobuoys, and operational costs to clear them exceeded $200 million. A $12 million investment had required a $200 million response. That ratio also appeared in the procurement briefs. In Jerusalem, the Israeli cabinet met in an emergency session that lasted 3 hours. The strikes were described as a limited defensive operation targeting Iran's ability to fund hostile activities against Israel. The phrase economic heart was not used by any Israeli official. It didn't need to be. Every headline in the world was already using it. The cabinet authorized continued intelligence operations but no additional strikes. The message had been delivered. It was a very expensive message, delivered very precisely, to a very specific set of targets chosen not for their military significance but for their economic irreplaceability. Israel had not touched a single military base, a single air defense site, a single government building. It had hit the money. Everything else flows from money. In Washington, the president held a brief press availability at 8 a.m. Eastern. He confirmed that U.S. forces had conducted freedom of navigation operations in the Strait of Hormuz. He did not mention mines. He did not mention the Shari Cord. He did not mention underwater drones or explosive ordnance disposal teams cutting anchor chains in the dark. He said that the strait was open, that it would remain open, and that any entity attempting to close it would face consequences. When asked about the Israeli strikes, he said that Israel had the right to defend itself and that the United States had not participated in offensive operations. Both statements were technically accurate. The mine clearance was classified as a defensive operation. The electronic warfare aircraft were Israeli, not American. The distinction between participating and coordinating was apparently a matter of interpretation. Beijing's response came at 11 a.m. Beijing time, roughly 12 hours after the first strike. It was unusually blunt by Chinese diplomatic standards. The foreign ministry spokesman described the strikes as reckless and destabilizing and called for all parties to exercise restraint. The interesting word was not reckless. It was all parties. China was not singling out Israel. It was warning Iran as well. Don't close the strait. We need that oil more than you need revenge. The ambassador in Tehran was finally put through to the foreign minister. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. Its contents were not disclosed, but Iran's state media coverage of the crisis shifted notably afterward. The language about retaliation became less specific. The timelines became vaguer. Some things translate the same in every language. One of them is don't do anything stupid. 72 hours after the strikes, a preliminary damage assessment compiled by commercial satellite analytics firms estimated the total economic impact as follows. Direct infrastructure damage to Karg Island and Abadan, $3.50 to $5 billion. Lost oil revenue for Iran over the following 12 months, $18 to $24 billion. Increased global oil costs attributable to the supply disruption, approximately $400 billion annualized, distributed across every oil-importing economy on the planet. Cost of the Israeli munitions used in the strikes, approximately $17 million. Cost of the American mine clearance operation, approximately $200 million. Cost of the mines themselves, approximately $12 million. The most expensive single item destroyed in the entire operation was a crude oil storage tank at Abadan that had been built in 1963. Its replacement cost was estimated at $180 million. The missile that destroyed it cost $1.2 million. The missile that missed its target and hit a maintenance road cost the same $1.2 million. It destroyed approximately $40,000 worth of asphalt. 6 weeks later, the Shari Cord was quietly towed to a shipyard in Bandar Abbas. An inspection of its engine room found nothing wrong with its engines. Both main propulsion diesel engines were fully functional. The engine room failure had been simulated by the crew on orders from IRGC Navy Command. The crew had not been told why. They had been told to fake a breakdown at specific coordinates and deploy their anchor. They did what they were told. They spent 11 hours sitting on top of a weapon that could have killed every person on their ship if something had gone wrong. They were not told about the mine. The ERGC Navy did not consider this relevant to their assignment. The captain of the Shari Corps resigned from the Iranian merchant marine within a month. He did not give a public reason. People who knew him said he had developed a persistent fear of deep water. Nobody else resigned. The oil kept burning. The prices kept climbing. And in shipping offices from Singapore to Rotterdam to Houston, insurance underwriters quietly added a new surcharge to every policy covering Persian Gulf transits. The surcharge was 17%. Nobody argued about it. When the math is that clear, nobody needs to. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other video on how Iran's mine warfare strategy nearly shut down the Persian Gulf in 1988. Bye for now. At 0342 local time, a Tomahawk Block B cruise missile crossed the Iranian coastline at 550 miles per hour, 50 feet above the salt flats south of Bandar Abbas. It was the first of 47 launched from the USS Gettysburg, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser positioned 340 nautical miles southwest in the Gulf of Oman. The missile's terrain-following radar painted the ground ahead like a blind man reading Braille at highway speed, adjusting altitude 40 times per second to hug the earth beneath Iranian air defense coverage. The Tomahawk costs $2.1 million. The target it was aimed at, a hardened aircraft shelter at Bandar Abbas Air Base, cost Iran $180,000 to build in 1987. The math would have been funny if 12 more weren't already in the air behind it. What the cruise missile didn't know, what the mission planners aboard the Gettysburg couldn't have known, was that the shelter had been empty for 9 days. The Su-35 that was supposed to be inside had been towed to a dispersal site 14 kilometers north, parked under camouflage netting between 2 apartment buildings in a residential district. The Iranians had stopped trusting their hardened shelters the day American satellites started counting shadows. The Tomahawk flew for another 23 minutes. It threaded a valley between 2 mountain ridges, popped up to 200 feet to clear a communications tower, dropped back down, and detonated against 4 feet of reinforced concrete protecting absolutely nothing. Somewhere in Bandar Abbas, an IRGC logistics officer was probably already drafting the press release about intercepting an American cruise missile. 120 nautical miles to the north, over the Strait of Hormuz, the real problem was just getting started. An E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, call sign Overwatch, orbited at 25,000 feet with its APY-9 radar spinning lazy circles above the water. The APY-9 can track over 2,000 targets simultaneously out to 350 nautical miles. It sees everything from fishing boats to ballistic missiles and sorts them into categories the way a bouncer sorts a club line: harmless, watch closely, or call the cops. Right now it was watching something that didn't fit any category. A surface contact, radar cross-section consistent with a small fishing vessel, had been tracking northeast at 8 knots for the past 6 hours. Normal behavior for the hundreds of dhows that work these waters. Except this one had stopped 40 minutes ago, and now it was accelerating. 15 knots, 25, 40. The operator keyed his radio. Overwatch to sentry flight, surface contact bearing 047, range 85, speed now indicating 45 knots. Classify fast attack. 45 knots from a dhow was impossible. 45 knots from a small combatant was Tuesday in the Persian Gulf. 80 nautical miles southeast. 2F divided by a -18E Super Hornets from VFA 143, the Pukin dogs, were already turning toward the contact. They had been flying combat air patrol since 0200, bored, caffeinated, and hoping something would happen. Something was happening. Sentry Lee descended through 15,000 feet and put his APG-79 radar, an active electronically scanned array that can switch from air-to-air to air-to-ground modes faster than a pilot can blink, onto the surface. The contact resolved. Small hull, deck-mounted structure, thermal bloom consistent with gas turbine exhaust. Paycap class fast attack craft, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy, 76 feet long, armed with 2 Chinese C-701 anti-ship missiles, capable of 52 knots in calm water. The ARGC had 14 of them scattered across the Gulf, and they used them the way insurgents use car bombs: cheap, fast, expendable, and absolutely capable of ruining someone's day. The Paycap wasn't alone. As Sentry Lead watched, 2 more thermal signatures emerged from behind a rocky outcrop on the Iranian coast. Then 2 more. 5 fast attack craft accelerating toward the Gettysburg's last known position in a spread formation designed to overwhelm point defense systems with simultaneous attacks from multiple vectors. What the Paycap commanders didn't know was that the Gettysburg wasn't where they thought it was. The cruiser had displaced 30 nautical miles west 4 hours ago, standard operating procedure after a Tomahawk launch to avoid exactly this kind of retaliation. The Iranians were charging toward a patch of empty ocean where an American warship had been yesterday. But 30 nautical miles west put the Gettysburg directly in line with something else. The USNS Rappahannock, a fleet replenishment oiler, currently transferring 400,000 gallons of JP-5 aviation fuel to the USS Bataan, an amphibious assault ship carrying 1,800 Marines and the aviation assets to support them. 2 ships connected by fuel lines, dead in the water, 95 nautical miles from 5 inbound missiles on hulls. The geometry was about to get very personal. Overwatch plotted the intercept. At current speeds, the PACAP formation would reach the replenishment group in 47 minutes. The Gettysburg could engage with SM-6 missiles at 130 nautical miles. The Super Hornets could engage with Harpoons at 70. The problem wasn't range. The problem was identification. Rules of engagement required positive identification before weapons release. A PACAP looked exactly like a civilian speedboat on radar until it launched a missile or opened fire. The C-701 had a range of 15 nautical miles. A PACAP could close to launch range, fire, and be turning away before a pilot confirmed it was military. And the Strait of Hormuz at any given moment contained somewhere between 200 and 400 civilian vessels that looked exactly the same size on radar. Sentry Lead descended to 8,000 feet and slaved his targeting pod to the lead contact. The Fleur, a camera system that can read a license plate from 10 miles away in daylight, showed a gray hull, no flag, deck-mounted launcher that could have been a missile rail or a fishing net crane. He needed closer. 5 miles from the contact, doing 400 knots, Sentry Lead rolled wings level and let the Fleur build a picture. 2 tubes angled forward on the bow. Definitely military. Definitely armed. He keyed the radio. Sentry Lead, Overwatch, Tally Hostile, PACAP class, weapons visible, requesting clearance to engage. The response took 11 seconds. In those 11 seconds, the formation covered another half-mile toward the replenishment group. Sentry Flight, Overwatch, cleared to engage, weapons free on hostile surface contacts. The lead Hornet was carrying 2 AGM-84D Harpoon anti-ship missiles. The Harpoon costs $1.4 million, flies at 530 miles per hour, carries a 488-pound warhead, and was designed during the Cold War to sink Soviet cruisers. Using it on a 76-foot patrol boat was like hunting rabbits with a howitzer. Effective? Certainly. Cost-efficient? Absolutely not. Sentry Lead pickled the first Harpoon at 18 nautical miles. The missile dropped from the centerline station, turbofan ignited, and accelerated toward the sea surface while its radar seeker searched for the largest metal object in its field of view. The PACAP's radar warning receiver screamed. At 52 knots, the patrol boat commander had roughly 90 seconds to decide between evasion and acceptance. He chose evasion. Hard turn to port, chaff blooming behind the boat like metallic confetti, a maneuver that might have worked against an older missile. The Harpoon's seeker wasn't fooled. It ignored the chaff cloud, adjusted course 3 degrees, and impacted the PACAP's stern at 530 miles per hour. A 488-pound warhead against a 76-foot hull is less a naval engagement than a magic trick. The boat was there, then it wasn't. Fire, debris, and 6 crew members scattered across a quarter-mile of water. 4 PACAPs remaining. 42 minutes to the replenishment group. What the American pilots didn't know was that the PACAP attack was a diversion. The real threat was already inside the engagement envelope, and it had been there for 3 hours. A Goddard-class midget submarine, 29 meters long, diesel-electric, virtually silent at creep speed, had been loitering 8 nautical miles southwest of the replenishment group's current position since before dawn. The Goddard was designed for exactly this mission: shallow water ambush in the crowded shipping lanes of the Gulf, where thermal layers and biological noise made submarine detection a nightmare. The Goddard carried 2 heavyweight torpedoes. Either one could break a ship's back. Both could sink an oiler full of aviation fuel and the 400 men aboard it. Aboard the Rappahannock, the unrep was 60% complete. Fuel hoses stretched between the 2 ships like umbilical cords, JP-5 flowing at 800 gallons per minute. The ships moved at 12 knots, slow enough to maintain the connection, fast enough to keep steerage way. Neither captain knew what was 8 miles behind them. The Goddard commander had been watching through his periscope for 20 minutes, building a firing solution on the larger of the 2 contacts. The torpedo run would take 4 minutes at high speed. Once he fired, the Americans would know exactly where he was. He would have perhaps 90 seconds before every sonobuoy and dipping sonar in the Gulf converged on his position. 1 shot, maybe 2. Then run for shallow water and pray. He flooded the tubes. 30,000 feet above, an MQ-4 Sea Triton, the Navy's high-altitude surveillance drone, detected something that shouldn't have existed. A momentary thermal anomaly on the water surface, 8 nautical miles from the replenishment group, consistent with a submarine's diesel exhaust venting. The Goddard had snorkeled 6 hours ago to recharge batteries. The Triton's multispectral sensors caught the residual heat signature where the exhaust had warmed the surface water. The algorithm flagged it. A human analyst in a ground station 7,000 miles away looked at the flag, cross-referenced it with acoustic data from a distributed sonobuoy field, and made a phone call. Overwatch received the flash traffic 47 seconds later. The E-2D operator stared at his screen. The submarine contact was behind the replenishment group, inside minimum torpedo range, positioned for an ambush shot on the oiler's vulnerable stern. The paycaps charging from the northeast weren't the attack. They were the distraction, forcing American assets to focus north while the real threat crept in from the south. Two problems. One airframe available to solve them. An MH-60R Seahawk, call sign Hunter 2-1, was orbiting 15 nautical miles east of the replenishment group, originally tasked with surface search along the shipping lanes. The Seahawk carried two Mk-54 lightweight torpedoes, a dipping sonar, and a crew of 4 who were about to have a very busy morning. Hunter 2-1, Overwatch, Retask Immediate, subsurface contact bearing 195 from Hotel Alpha, range 8, classify hostile, cleared hot. The pilot banked hard, dropped the nose, and started toward the contact at 140 knots. The tactical coordinator in the back began programming the sonar, while the sensor operator readied a torpedo. They had maybe 6 minutes before the Goddard was in optimal firing position. Maybe less. 40 nautical miles north, the remaining paycaps were spreading further apart, each boat now a separate threat axis requiring individual tracking. Sentry 2 engaged the second contact with a harpoon at 15 miles. Impact. 3 remaining. The Super Hornets were running low on anti-ship missiles. 2 harpoons remaining between them, 3 targets, and the rules of engagement didn't allow gun runs on surface contacts that hadn't fired first. The math wasn't working. Overwatch made a call. Sentry flight, break off surface engagement, redirect to subsurface prosecution support. The paycaps would have to be someone else's problem. The submarine was 6 minutes from a firing solution on an oiler carrying enough fuel to burn for a week. Hunter 2-1 arrived over the datum point and deployed the dipping sonar. The AQS-22 dropped into the water on 200 feet of cable, its transducer pinging active pulses into the thermocline while passive arrays listened for engine noise, prop cavitation, anything that sounded like a submarine instead of a shrimp bed. Contact. Bearing 210, range 2,400 yards, depth 80 feet, moving slowly northeast. The Goddard commander heard the dipping sonar the moment it went active. He had roughly 30 seconds before the helicopter prosecuted. He could fire now, accept the counterattack, and hope the torpedo reached its target before his boat was destroyed. Or he could go deep, run silent, and try to escape into the acoustic clutter of the shipping lanes. He fired both torpedoes. The acoustic signature of a torpedo launch is unmistakable. 2 distinct splashes, followed by the high-frequency whine of contra-rotating propellers accelerating toward 45 knots. The Seahawk crew heard it instantly. Hunter 2-1, torpedo in the water, 2 fish, bearing 030, speed 45, depth 40 feet. The sensor operator dropped a Mk-54 on the submarine's position, while the pilot keyed the guard frequency to warn the replenishment group. The torpedo entered the water, acquired the Goddard screw noise, and started its terminal run. 4 miles north, aboard the Rappahannock, alarm sounded. Emergency breakaway. The fuel hoses disconnected automatically, valves slamming shut to prevent spills, while both ships went to flank speed and diverged. A replenishment ship emergency breakaway takes approximately 2 minutes. The incoming torpedoes would cover 4 miles in 5 minutes. The math was close. The Batan's SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite detected the torpedo seekers and began jamming, filling the water with acoustic noise designed to confuse the guidance systems. The Rappahannock had no such system. It had a hull full of aviation fuel and a top speed of 20 knots. The first torpedo tracked straight for the oiler's wake. Torpedo seekers home on the acoustic disturbance a ship's propellers leave in the water, a trail of turbulence and cavitation bubbles that points directly at the target like an arrow. The Rappahannock was making 20 knots, generating exactly the kind of wake a torpedo loves. 900 yards out, the torpedo's seeker locked onto the bubble trail and accelerated for terminal attack. The Batan launched a Nixie torpedo decoy, a towed noisemaker designed to sound more like a ship than the ship itself. It pulled away from the formation at 25 knots, trailing 500 yards behind the Batan's stern, screaming acoustic energy into the water like a drunk at a concert. The second torpedo, the one tracking the Batan, diverted. It abandoned the warship's wake and chased the Nixie, detonating 200 yards behind the decoy in an explosion that sent a geyser of water 100 feet into the air. The concussion rattled windows aboard the Batan but caused no damage. The first torpedo didn't have a decoy to chase. The Rappahannock didn't carry Nixie. It carried fuel. 400 yards. 300. The Seahawk's Mk-54 impacted the Goddard at the same moment. The midget submarine, running shallow to escape, took a 96-pound warhead through its pressure hull. The explosion broke the boat in half. Both sections sank in water too shallow to hide them, 200 feet down, visible on sonar as 2 distinct debris fields. 29 Iranian sailors died without ever knowing if their torpedoes hit. They didn't. At 150 yards, the Iranian torpedo's guidance system suffered a failure that the after-action report would later attribute to thermal gradients near the surface. The weapon passed 40 yards ahead of the Rappahannock's bow, continued northeast for another mile, exhausted its fuel, and sank. The oiler's captain was about to need new underwear. Everyone aboard the Rappahannock was about to need a drink. But 400,000 gallons of aviation fuel continued floating on the surface of the Gulf, unburned, because a torpedo seeker hiccuped at the wrong moment. Luck is not a military strategy, but it is occasionally a military outcome. 70 nautical miles to the north, the remaining 3 paycaps had closed to within 25 nautical miles of where they thought the Gettysburg was. They were still charging toward empty ocean. The Gettysburg, now fully aware of the threat, had launched 2 SM-6 missiles at the closest contact. The SM-6 is a different animal than the Harpoon. It costs $4.3 million, flies at Mach 3.5, and was designed to intercept aircraft and cruise missiles at extreme range. Using it against a patrol boat was like swatting a mosquito with a sledgehammer. But the sledgehammer was available, and the mosquito was 25 miles away and carrying anti-ship missiles. The first SM-6 impacted the 3rd paycap in a vertical dive from 70,000 feet, converting the boat into scattered debris before the crew knew they'd been targeted. A $4.3 million missile against a $3 million patrol boat. The economics were almost reasonable, if you squinted. 2 paycaps remaining. Both had watched their formation mates disappear and decided discretion was the better part of martyrdom. They turned, went to maximum speed, and ran for Iranian territorial waters. The Gettysburg could have pursued. The ROE allowed engagement of hostile forces attempting to flee. But 2 patrol boats running home at 52 knots weren't a threat anymore. They were a message. Iran had just lost a submarine, 4 fast attack craft, and approximately 80 personnel in under 30 minutes. The Americans had lost nothing but missiles and fuel. The exchange rate was what defense analysts would later call unsustainable. 400 nautical miles to the west, in a bunker complex outside Natanz, an IRGC general was receiving real-time reports of the disaster. The paycap attack had been his plan. The submarine ambush had been his innovation. Both had failed completely, killed everyone involved, and destroyed assets that would take years to replace. He looked at the map on his wall, the blue symbols marking American carrier positions, the red symbols marking Iranian assets that no longer existed, and began drafting a message to Tehran. The message recommended immediate cessation of naval operations in the Gulf. The message noted that American anti-submarine capabilities had proven significantly more effective than intelligence assessments predicted. The message did not mention that the general had been the one who wrote those assessments. 3 days later, the Iranian Navy pulled every remaining Ghadar submarine back to port. The paycap fleet, now reduced by a third, was ordered to cease operations in international waters. The Strait of Hormuz remained open. Oil continued flowing to Asia and Europe at the rate of 21 million barrels per day. The entire engagement, from the first Tomahawk launch to the last paycap fleeing for Iranian waters, had lasted 3 hours and 47 minutes. It had cost Iran 1 submarine, 4 patrol boats, and any illusion that harassment tactics in the Gulf would go unpunished. It had cost the United States approximately $18 million in missiles spent on targets worth perhaps a tenth of that value. Defense contractors in Tucson and St. Louis were probably already scheduling celebratory lunches. Aboard the Rappahannock, the crew secured from general quarters and resumed replenishment operations with the Bataan. The fuel transfer that had been interrupted by torpedo attack completed 4 hours later without further incident. The oiler's deck log noted the event in the understated language the Navy reserves for near-death experiences. 0347 emergency breakaway due to hostile subsurface activity. 0351 torpedo passed ahead at close range. 0815 resumed unrep. The Bataan's Marines, most of whom had slept through the entire engagement in berthing compartments below the waterline, woke up to rumors about torpedoes and submarines and decided the Navy types were probably exaggerating. The Navy types decided not to correct them. Hunter 2-1 recovered aboard the Bataan with empty torpedo tubes and a crew that would be telling this story for the rest of their careers. The sensor operator who called the submarine contact would receive a Navy Achievement Medal 6 months later. The citation would note his quick reaction to developing tactical situation, without mentioning that developing tactical situation was Pentagon speak for almost got an oiler blown up. The Triton drone that detected the submarine's thermal signature continued orbiting at 55,000 feet, its cameras and sensors sweeping the Gulf with the patience of a machine that doesn't get bored, doesn't get tired, and costs $180 million to build. The algorithm that flagged the thermal anomaly would be updated the following week to improve detection of diesel submarine exhaust patterns. A programmer in San Diego added 6 lines of code and went to lunch. Somewhere in the Gulf, an Iranian rescue vessel searched for survivors from the Ghadar. They found debris, an oil slick, and no one alive. The submarine had been one of 23 in Iran's midget submarine fleet, vessels specifically designed for operations in the shallow, cluttered waters of the Gulf. 22 remained. But the commanders of those 22 now knew exactly what would happen if they tried the same tactic again. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through it every day. For 3 hours and 47 minutes on a Tuesday morning, control of that passage was genuinely contested. Then it wasn't. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other video on the F-35's electronic warfare capabilities that helped shape the air battle over Iran. Bye for now. At 4:12 local time, 2 Khalij-Fars anti-ship ballistic missiles leave their transporter erector launchers from a ridgeline above Bandar Abbas and accelerate through the pre-dawn darkness over the Strait of Hormuz. Their target is 120 kilometers to the south, moving at 18 knots through international waters. It weighs 104,000 tons. It carries 90 aircraft, and it has no idea that the next 6 minutes are about to rewrite every assumption the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has held about what it means to strike an American aircraft carrier. The USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, is the 4th Nimitz-class carrier to rotate through the 5th Fleet area of operations this year. Her flight deck stretches 1,092 feet. Her 4 catapults can throw a 50,000-pound aircraft from 0 to 165 miles per hour in under 3 seconds. Her air wing, Carrier Air Wing 7, includes 44F divided by a -18E and F Super Hornets, 5EA, 18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, and an assortment of helicopters and surveillance platforms that give her the ability to see, jam, and kill anything within a 500 nautical mile radius. She costs $8.5 billion. The 2 missiles heading toward her cost $3 million combined. Somebody in Tehran looked at that math and thought it was a bargain. The strike group surrounding the Lincoln is not a single ship. It is a floating fortress spread across 40 nautical miles of dark water. The guided missile destroyers USS Carney and USS Nitsa, both Arleigh Burke-class flight IIA ships, carry a combined 192 vertical launch cells. Between them, those cells hold SM-6 interceptors capable of engaging targets from sea level to the edge of space, SM-2 Block IIC area defense missiles, Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, and Evolved Sea Sparrow point defense rounds. Beneath the surface, 300 meters down in the warm waters of the Gulf of Oman, the Los Angeles-class attack submarine USS Cheyenne tracks every Iranian vessel within 60 kilometers using her BQQ-10 sonar suite while carrying 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles in her torpedo tubes, each one programmed with coordinates that were last updated 4 hours ago. This is the most capable naval formation on Earth. And in the mountains above Bandar Abbas, the IRGC Aerospace Force battery commander who just launched those 2 ballistic missiles believes he has found its weakness. He is not entirely wrong. 130 kilometers north of the Lincoln, along 3 separate stretches of Iranian coastline, 12 Shahed 238 jet-powered attack drones ignite their turbojet engines 40 seconds after the ballistic missiles launch. These are not the lumbering Shahed 136 one-way attack drones that became famous over Ukraine, the ones that sound like lawnmowers and fly at 115 miles per hour. The Shahed 238 is a different animal entirely. Turbojet-powered, radar-guided, capable of Mach 0.8, roughly 600 miles per hour at wave-top altitude. They cross the radar horizon with less than 90 seconds of warning time. Each one costs approximately $50,000. All 12 together cost less than a single SM-6 interceptor, which runs the United States Navy $4.3 million per round. Every missile fired to stop a $50,000 drone is a financial victory for Tehran before a single warhead detonates. The Lincoln's Spy-6 radar, the most advanced naval search radar ever deployed, detects the 2 ballistic missiles at a range of 270 kilometers. The system classifies the threat, computes an intercept solution, and passes it to the Aegis Combat System aboard USS Carney in under 2 seconds. The alarm sounds across every ship in the strike group simultaneously. Battle stations. The entire carrier defense architecture shifts to full engagement posture in 11 seconds. Sailors who were asleep 15 seconds ago are running to their stations in the dark, pulling on flash gear, strapping into chairs. USS Carney fires 2 SM-6 interceptors at the lead ballistic missile. The SM-6 is a 3,300-pound missile that accelerates to Mach 3.5, roughly 2,700 miles per hour, and can engage targets at ranges exceeding 150 nautical miles. Think of a telephone pole that steers itself through the atmosphere using an active radar seeker in its nose, hunting its target the way a flashlight finds a face in a dark room. The first SM-6 finds the lead Khalij-Fars cleanly. Intercept at 60 kilometers. The ballistic missile disintegrates. Debris rains into black water that nobody will ever search. The second ballistic missile is the problem. It executes a terminal maneuver, a pre-programmed we've designed to defeat the predictive algorithms that guide American interceptors during the final phase of engagement. 2 SM-6 missiles chase it. The first loses tracking during the maneuver and self-destructs. The second detonates close enough to shred the seeker head and damage the guidance fins. but the warhead survives. The missile transitions from a guided weapon to a 1,500-pound piece of debris falling along a degraded ballistic arc, and that arc intersects the flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. At 4:16 local time, 4 minutes and 44 seconds after launch, the damaged Khalij Fars strikes the Lincoln's flight deck at an angle, punches through the armored steel plating, and detonates inside the hangar bay. The warhead is a unitary high-explosive penetrator. The fireball reaches 60 feet. 3F divided by a -18E Super Hornets parked in the hangar bay are destroyed instantly. Shrapnel tears through bulkheads. The concussion wave throws sailors against walls, into equipment, onto the deck. 9 American sailors in the hangar bay die in the first second. 27 more are wounded by blast, burns, and fragmentation. The flight deck buckles across a 40-meter section. The number 3 catapult is offline. Fire suppression systems activate automatically, but the hangar bay fire has already. Drones are 30 seconds out. What the IRGC planners understood, what made their attack architecture genuinely brilliant, was sequencing. The ballistic missiles were never meant to sink the Lincoln. They were meant to saturate the Aegis engagement timeline at exactly the moment the low-altitude drone swarm crossed the radar horizon. Every SM-6 fired upward at a ballistic missile is an SM-6 that cannot be fired laterally at a sea-skimming drone. Every second the fire control system spends computing a ballistic intercept solution is a second it is not tracking the wave-top threats approaching from 3 different azimuths. It is the right idea. It has been the right idea in every simulation the IRGC has run for the past decade. And in this moment, it is working. 12 Shahed 238 drones cross the radar horizon at 18 kilometers. The Aegis systems aboard Carney and Nitsa detect them, but the engagement windows are compressed. 7 drones are intercepted, 5 by SM-2 missiles, 2 by the Phalanx CWS close-in weapon systems, the automated 20mm Gatling guns that serve as the final layer of defense. Each Phalanx fires 75 rounds per second, throwing a wall of tungsten into the path of an incoming threat at a range of less than 2 kilometers. 5 drones penetrate. 2 strike the Lincoln's Island superstructure, the command tower rising above the flight deck. 1 hits the forward flight deck near the damaged section, compounding the structural failure. 2 hit USS Nitsa. Her bridge is destroyed. Her commanding officer, executive officer, and 6 watchstanders are killed instantly. 8 more American sailors dead. At 4:17 local time, 5 minutes into the attack, the toll stands at 17 American sailors killed and 62 wounded across 2 ships. The Lincoln's flight deck is burning. Nitsa is combat effective from her secondary control station, but her command structure has been decapitated. Carney is undamaged but has expended 23 SM-6 interceptors, each one worth $4.3 million. The math so far: Iran spent roughly $6.6 million in weapons. The interceptors alone cost $98.9 million. Tehran's procurement office could call that a win even if every weapon missed. What the IRGC battery commander did not know, what his intelligence officers could not have told him, what no Iranian signals intercept or Russian satellite feed had ever revealed, was that the response to his attack had been planned, authorized, armed, and loaded into launch systems 11 months before he pressed the fire button. Operation Granite Hammer. Classified contingency strike package, submitted by United States Central Command to the Secretary of Defense following 14 months of escalating IRGC harassment of American carrier groups in the Strait of Hormuz. The package identified 41 Iranian military targets within 350 kilometers of the strait. Every radar site, missile battery, command node, fuel depot, weapons storage facility, drone launch platform, and naval base that contributes to Iran's ability to threaten carrier operations in the Hormuz transit corridor. Each target was assigned to a specific platform. Each platform was assigned specific weapons. Flight routes were deconflicted. Time on target calculations ensured simultaneous impact across all 41 targets. And the Secretary of Defense signed pre-delegated launch authority. No White House phone call. No National Security Council meeting. No congressional notification before execution. The trigger condition was simple: confirmed hostile fire from Iranian territory resulting in American casualties aboard a United States warship. Iran satisfied that condition at 4:16 local time. The execution order reaches 5 platforms simultaneously at 4:18, 2 minutes after the Lincoln took her first hit. 180 nautical miles to the southeast, in the deep water of the Gulf of Oman, the USS Florida surfaces to launch depth. Florida is not a regular submarine. She is an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, originally built as a ballistic missile boat, converted to carry 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles in 22 vertical launch tubes. She is the most heavily armed conventional strike platform in the United States Navy. Her crew has been at modified battle stations for 9 days, waiting for a message exactly like the one that just arrived. Beneath the strike group, USS Cheyenne acknowledges her portion of the strike package. Her 12 Tomahawks are already warm. 2,100 nautical miles to the south, over the central Arabian Sea, two B-2 Spirit stealth bombers from the 509th Bomb Wing, operating out of Diego Garcia, have been holding in a racetrack orbit for 6 hours. Each carries 16 GBU, 57 massive ordnance penetrators, bunker-busting bombs weighing 30,000 pounds each, designed to penetrate 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. They were built for exactly 3 categories of targets on Earth: North Korean tunnels, Iranian mountain bunkers, and Chinese underground facilities. Today they have Iranian addresses. Aboard USS Carney, despite the chaos of the past 5 minutes, the weapons officer executes her assigned launch sequence. Her vertical launch cells still function. Tomahawks begin rising from the forward deck. And on the Lincoln herself, even as damage control teams fight the hangar bay fire, 12F divided by a -18E Super Hornets from Strike Fighter Squadron 86 that were already airborne on Combat Air Patrol receive updated targeting packages. Each aircraft carries 2 AGM-158C long-range anti-ship missiles reconfigured for land attack, known as JSSMER, the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range. Range: 575 miles. They can release from outside Iranian radar coverage, turn around, and land back on an Allied airfield without ever crossing into Iranian airspace. From authorization to last weapon away, 6 minutes and 11 seconds. Total precision-guided munitions converging on Iranian territory, 148. 41 targets. Simultaneous time on target impact calculated to the second. The largest coordinated naval strike since Operation Desert Storm, assembled from assets that were pre-positioned, preloaded, and waiting for exactly this morning. Somewhere in a Raytheon boardroom, the next quarterly earnings call just wrote itself. First impacts begin at 4:27 local time, 11 minutes after the Lincoln took her hit. Bandar Abbas Integrated Missile Command Center. This is the brain. The facility that coordinated the morning's attack sits under 3 meters of reinforced concrete, hardened against conventional cruise missile strikes, considered survivable against anything short of a nuclear weapon. 2 GBU, 57 massive ordnance penetrators arrive 0.4 seconds apart. The first punches through the roof and buries itself in the operations level. The second follows through the entry hole and detonates at a depth of 40 feet. 30,000 pounds of guided American steel moving at 700 miles per hour does not care about reinforced concrete. The command center collapses into itself. Every officer who planned and executed the morning's carrier strike dies in the same detonation. Their screens are still showing the damage assessment of the Lincoln when the ceiling becomes the floor. 90 kilometers east, at Bandar Jask, the Khalij Fars battery that launched the 2 missiles at the Lincoln this morning is still repositioning its transporter erector launchers for a second salvo. The battery commander has been on the radio for 6 minutes trying to confirm the Lincoln's damage. He wants to fire again. 8 Tomahawks arrive before he gets his answer. The launch vehicles explode on their transports. The reload trucks, parked 200 meters behind the ridgeline in what the battery crew believed was a concealed position, cook off simultaneously. The fuel depot ignites. Secondary explosions continue for 9 minutes. Every piece of equipment and every crew member associated with the morning's ballistic launch ceases to exist. Iran's carrier killer battery program just became a $400 million debris field. 200 kilometers to the west, Kish Island Air Defense Radar Complex. This is the installation that provided the Lincoln's coordinates to the missile battery. Without its long-range phased array radar feeding targeting data in real time, the ballistic strike could not have been coordinated. 12 Tomahawks are allocated. The phased array antenna, a structure the size of a 3-story building, disappears in the first 4 impacts. The command building takes 3 direct hits through its roof. Backup generators, communication towers, the vehicle park, all destroyed within 40 seconds. Iranian maritime surveillance across a 200-kilometer sector of the strait goes permanently dark. The operators who spent 9 hours tracking the Lincoln and feeding her position to the missile crews have the same amount of warning time their targets did. Which is to say, none. Keshem Island IRGC Naval Base. Iran's forward operating position for fast attack boat operations in the strait. 47 missile-armed speedboats are tied to their moorings. Each boat carries 2 C-802 anti-ship missiles, a Chinese-derived weapon with a range of 120 kilometers. In IRGC doctrine, these boats would swarm an American warship in coordinated waves, overwhelming point defenses with sheer numbers. 8 Tomahawks hit the pier complex. Boats explode at their berths as their missile magazines detonate. The fuel farm ignites into a column of fire visible from 60 kilometers. The barracks, the maintenance shops, the base commander's headquarters, systematically destroyed in a 90-second window. 47 boats that were supposed to be Iran's insurance policy against American naval power burn at the waterline. It turns out the swarm doctrine works better when the swarm survives to launch. Shahid Bayhoner Naval Base. Iran's primary IRGC naval headquarters for Strait of Hormuz operations.
18 Tomahawks.
The four-story headquarters building, the operational brain of Iran's entire Hormuz defense strategy, receives 4 cruise missiles through its facade in a 2-second sequence. The building pancakes. The operations center that was monitoring the Lincoln's damage and drafting follow-up strike orders is buried under 20 meters of concrete. The weapons storage facility takes 3 hits. Stored nor anti-ship missiles detonate in a chain reaction that destroys 4 adjacent structures and starts fires that will burn for 2 days. The 3 coastal drone launch positions from which the morning's 12 Shahid 238s were released each receive 6 Tomahawks. Mobile launchers, support vehicles, propellant storage, communications relays. Systematically erased across all 3 sites in a 4-minute window. 14 additional targets, radar nodes, communications relays, ammunition depots, hardened command bunkers scattered across a 300-kilometer coastal arc, receive the remaining weapons. Total strike duration from first impact to last detonation, 4 minutes and 52 seconds. At 4:32 local time, 20 minutes after the attack on the Lincoln began, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' entire integrated anti-ship and anti-carrier strike network along the Strait of Hormuz, a system that took 30 years and an estimated $40 billion to construct, exists only as satellite imagery of burning wreckage. The infrastructure is not damaged. It is not degraded. It is gone. And it was gone before the fires on the Lincoln's flight deck were contained. The exchange, calculated with the cold precision that defense analysts prefer. Iran fired 14 weapons. America returned 148. Iran killed 17 American sailors. An estimated 670 Iranian Revolutionary Guard personnel died across 41 facilities. Iran damaged 1 carrier and 1 destroyer, both reparable. America destroyed 41 installations, none rebuildable under current sanctions in any timeline that matters. Iran spent $6.6 million in munitions. The American response cost approximately $320 million in weapons expenditure, roughly the cost of 3 days of carrier operations in the 5th Fleet area of responsibility. Iran traded 30 years of military infrastructure for 6 minutes of footage showing smoke rising from an American flight deck. That footage will play on Iranian state television for decades. But the satellite images of 41 burning facilities will play in every IRGC planning room for longer. The diplomatic aftermath unfolds with mechanical predictability. Iran's foreign ministry claims the Lincoln violated an Iranian maritime exclusion zone, a zone that does not exist under international law and has never been recognized by any nation including Iran's own allies. The United States releases full radar tracks proving the Lincoln's position in international waters, communications intercepts confirming attack authorization from IRGC headquarters, and satellite imagery of every destroyed facility. The evidence package reaches the United Nations, NATO, and every Gulf capital within 3 hours. Saudi Arabia calls the Iranian attack unprovoked aggression. The UAE offers expanded port access for American ship repairs. Bahrain reaffirms its defense cooperation agreement. Even Oman, Tehran's traditional back-channel partner, issues a statement expressing deep concern. The regional message is unanimous and clear. Nobody is mourning Iran's missile batteries. The Lincoln returns to Bahrain under her own power. Flight deck repairs are estimated at 11 months. The 17 sailors killed are transported home with full military honors. Their families receive notification before any public statement. They were 21 years old, 23 years old, 34 years old. They had plans they had not yet finished making. And in every IRGC command post from Bandar Abbas to Tehran, the officers who survived the morning of the Lincoln incident now carry one piece of knowledge they did not have 24 hours ago. The American response to a carrier attack is not a decision. It is not a debate. It is not a proportional, calibrated, diplomatically sensitive reply designed for international optics. It is a preloaded, pre-authorized, pre-aimed annihilation package that activates automatically the moment American blood hits an American deck. The officer who gives the launch order does not just order an attack on a carrier. He orders the simultaneous destruction of his own command center, his own radar stations, his own missile batteries, his own naval base, and his own life. He just does not know it yet. Iran found out why Americans do not have free healthcare. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other video on what happens when China's carrier killer missiles meet the USS Gerald Ford's layered defense network. Bye for now. At 2:14 local time, a single Iranian Type 412 naval mine broke free from its anchor chain in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz and drifted 600 feet into the westbound shipping lane. It struck the hull of the MV Coral Meridian, a Maltese-flagged crude carrier loaded with 2 million barrels of Basra heavy. The detonation tore a 40-foot gash below the waterline. Within 9 minutes, crude oil was spreading across the warmest choke point on Earth at a rate of 4,000 gallons per minute. Within 14 minutes, the Coral Meridian was listing 11 degrees to port. Within 20 minutes, every maritime insurance company in London had frozen new policy issuances for the Persian Gulf. And within 1 hour, the price of Brent crude jumped $19.
That was Tuesday.
By Wednesday, the Strait of Hormuz was closed.
Not partially, not restricted, closed.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy had deployed over 300 sea mines across the shipping lanes in a 48-hour sprint, using a combination of fast attack craft, civilian dhows, and at least 4 Ghawar-class midget submarines. They had also activated shore-based anti-ship missile batteries at Keshem Island, Abu Musa, and the Larak coastal garrison. Any vessel attempting transit would face a layered threat combining contact mines, influence mines, cruise missiles, and fastboat swarms. The entire global energy market was being held hostage by roughly 60 miles of water. The stated reason, broadcast on Iranian state television by a spokesman for the Supreme National Security Council, was retaliation for what Tehran called an act of economic warfare. 6 days earlier, the United States had imposed a new round of sanctions targeting Iran's central bank, its sovereign wealth reserves held in Chinese and Emirati financial institutions, and for the first time, secondary sanctions on any port facility worldwide that processed Iranian crude. The effect was immediate and devastating. Iran's remaining oil exports, roughly 1.3 million barrels a day, mostly flowing to China and India through intermediary shell companies, froze overnight. Tankers that had been loading at Karg Island simply stopped. Payment channels collapsed. Tehran estimated losses of $90 million per day. So they closed the strait. And then the message came. At 11 o'clock Washington time on Wednesday morning, the White House released a 4-sentence statement. It did not use diplomatic language. It said that the mining of international waterways constituted an act of war under international maritime law. It said that the United States would guarantee freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. It said that Iran had 48 hours to begin verifiable mine clearance operations and withdraw all anti-ship missile systems to a distance of 50 kilometers from the coastline. And it said that failure to comply would result in the United States and its coalition partners taking all necessary action to reopen the strait.
48 hours.
That was the number. Not 72.
Not a week. 48.
Tehran's public response arrived in under an hour. The Supreme Leader's office issued a statement calling the ultimatum an act of arrogance that would be met with fire. The GRGC Navy commander went on television and said that any American warship entering the strait would be sent to the bottom. Social media accounts linked to the Basij militia began posting coordinates of American bases in the region with targeting overlays. The rhetoric was loud. The rhetoric was expected. But 600 miles to the south, at the Combined Air Operations Center at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the rhetoric was irrelevant. What mattered was the clock.
48 hours.
And the first 12 were already gone. At Al Udeid, the air tasking order for what was being called Operation Bright Horizon was already on its 3rd revision. The problem was not firepower. The United States 5th Fleet, already forward deployed in Bahrain, had been reinforced over the previous 72 hours by the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, which had transited the Suez Canal at flank speed, and the America Amphibious Ready Group coming from the Western Indian Ocean. Combined with assets already in theater, the Navy had 2 aircraft carriers, 9 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, 4 Ticonderoga-class cruisers, 3 Virginia-class attack submarines, and a combined air wing of over 140 aircraft. Ashore, the Air Force had F-35A Lightning IIs staged at Al Dhafra in the UAE, F-15E Strike Eagles at Al Udeid, B-1B Lancers rotating through Diego Garcia, and a squadron of F-22A Raptors that had quietly arrived at an undisclosed Gulf state airfield 3 days before the crisis even started. The problem was not firepower.
The problem was mines.
Sea mines are the most cost-effective weapon in naval warfare. An Iranian EM-52 rising mine costs roughly $10,000 to manufacture. The mine countermeasure vessel needed to find and neutralize it costs $600 million. A single mine can close a shipping lane for days. 300 mines can close it for weeks. And unlike missiles, which can be intercepted, or ships, which can be sunk, mines just sit there.
Silent, patient,
waiting for something heavy to pass overhead. Clearing them requires specialized ships, underwater drones, helicopter-towed sleds, and time.
Lots of time.
The U.S. Navy's mine countermeasures force in the Gulf consisted of 4 Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships, 8 MH-53EC Dragon helicopters, and a handful of unmanned underwater vehicles. Under normal conditions, clearing 300 mines from a waterway the size of the Strait of Hormuz would take 30 to 45 days. They did not have 30 to 45 days. They had 36 hours. 1,200 miles to the west, at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, the airlift was already underway. 2 C-17 Globemaster IIIs loaded with Mk-18 Mod 2 Kingfish unmanned underwater vehicles and their support equipment had departed 4 hours after the ultimatum. A third C-17 carried components of the AN/AQS 20 mine-hunting sonar system. A fourth carried a Navy explosive ordnance disposal team and 60,000 pounds of expendable mine neutralization charges. All 4 aircraft were bound for Bahrain. They would arrive in 11 hours. The equipment would need 6 hours to unpack and integrate. That left 19 hours before the deadline to actually start clearing mines. 300 miles southeast of the strait, the Virginia-class submarine USS Montana was running at 400 feet, making 8 knots on a course that would bring her to the eastern entrance of the strait within 14 hours. Her mission was not mine clearance. Her mission was something much more specific, and her crew did not yet know what it was. The captain had received a fragmentary order coded Pinnacle Lightning. The full tasking would arrive in 4 hours.
Until then, they waited.
At Bandar Abbas, the largest Iranian naval base on the Gulf, the IRGC Navy was not waiting. They were reinforcing. Commercial satellite imagery captured by Planet Labs at 9:47 local time showed 11 fast attack craft being loaded with what imagery analysts at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency identified as C-802 anti-ship cruise missiles. Each of those missiles carried a 365-pound warhead and had a range of 75 miles. 11 boats, each carrying 2 missiles. 22 missiles that could be launched from small, fast, difficult-to-track platforms dispersed along hundreds of miles of coastline. A single C-802 had crippled the Israeli corvette Hanit in 2006. 22 of them, fired in a coordinated salvo, could overwhelm the defenses of a destroyer. But the fast boats were only one layer. At Jask, 190 miles east of the strait, Iran had positioned its newest coastal defense system, the Khaliji-Fars ballistic anti-ship missile. This was a weapon the Pentagon had been watching for years. A modified Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missile with a terminal guidance seeker designed to hit moving ships. It came down at Mach 3 from the upper atmosphere, giving defenders seconds to react. Each launcher carried 2 missiles. Satellite imagery showed 4 launchers, meaning 8 missiles. The system had never been used in combat. Nobody wanted to find out if it worked the way the Iranians claimed it did. They were about to find out anyway. At 6:30 Wednesday evening, 20 hours into the countdown, the Combined Force Commander at 5th Fleet Headquarters in Bahrain held a video teleconference with CENTCOM in Tampa, the Joint Staff at the Pentagon, and the White House Situation Room. The plan that emerged had 4 phases and 0 margin for error. Phase 1 was suppression. Before a single mine could be cleared, the anti-ship missile threat had to be destroyed. Every known coastal defense site, every mobile launcher hide, every fastboat pen along the Iranian coast from Jask to Bushehr would be hit simultaneously. The Air Force would handle fixed sites with standoff weapons. The Navy would handle mobile targets and pop-up threats. Cyber Command would handle something else entirely. Phase 2 was clearance. The moment air superiority was established over the strait, mine countermeasure assets would begin sweeping a 6-mile-wide safe corridor through the densest minefields. MH-53E helicopters towing Mk-105 magnetic influence sweep sleds would handle the influence mines. Avenger-class ships using hull-mounted sonar would locate contact mines for EOD divers and UUVs to neutralize. The timeline for opening a single safe lane was estimated at 12 to 16 hours after clearance began. Phase 3 was escort. Once the corridor was open, a continuous naval escort operation would guide commercial vessels through the strait under the protective umbrella of Aegis-equipped warships. Phase 4 did not have a name on the briefing slide. It was listed only as contingency. Everyone in the room knew what it meant. If Iran escalated beyond the strait, if missiles started flying at bases or allies, the target list expanded to include Iran's integrated air defense network, its ballistic missile infrastructure, and its command and control nodes. Phase 4 was a regional war. Nobody wanted Phase 4. At 10:15 Wednesday night, 28 hours before the deadline, something changed. An RC-135 Rivet joint electronic surveillance aircraft orbiting at 34,000 feet over the Gulf of Oman detected an unusual communications pattern. Iranian military radio traffic, which had been running at roughly 4 times its normal volume since the crisis began, suddenly dropped. Not gradually, not in stages. It dropped by 80% in under 6 minutes. To a signals intelligence analyst, sudden communications silence means one of 2 things. Either the network has been destroyed, or the network has switched to a pre-planned wartime mode that relies on landlines, fiber optics and couriers instead of radio. The network had not been destroyed. Iran was going to wartime communications posture, 28 hours before the deadline expired. This mattered. It mattered because wartime comm switching is not something you do to bluff. It takes hours to coordinate. It disrupts normal operations. You only do it when you believe combat is imminent and you want to deny the enemy signals intelligence. The Rivet Joint's crew relayed the detection to the National Security Agency at Fort Meade, which confirmed the assessment within 40 minutes. Iran was not preparing to comply. Iran was preparing to fight. At Fort Meade, the The confirmation triggered something that had been staged for 72 hours. United States Cyber Command had been holding access to 14 pre-positioned implants embedded in Iranian military networks. These were not new intrusions. Some of them had been placed years earlier, maintained through patient, invisible persistence, updated quietly during routine Iranian software patches, tested through careful signals that mimicked normal network noise. 12 of the 14 implants were in the Integrated Air Defense Network command layer. One was in the IRGC Navy's shore-based missile coordination system. One was in the electrical grid serving Bandar Abbas Naval Base. None of them had ever been activated. They were insurance policies. Expensive, fragile, and single-use. Once triggered, the Iranians would find them, patch them, and they would be gone forever. Years of access, burned in seconds. The order to activate came at 11:40 Wednesday night. It was signed by the Secretary of Defense and confirmed by the President. Execution was set for 2 o'clock Thursday morning local time, exactly 6 hours before the deadline expired. That timing was deliberate. It would be dark. It would be 6 hours before Iran expected anything to happen. And it would give the first wave of aircraft just enough time to reach their targets before anyone on the ground realized their defenses were compromised. What Tehran didn't know was that the 48-hour ultimatum was never intended to expire. The deadline was theater. Useful theater, necessary theater, because it gave allies time to evacuate non-essential personnel, gave commercial shipping time to clear the area, and gave the diplomatic track just enough oxygen to claim that every alternative had been exhausted. But the operational timeline had never been 48 hours. The operational timeline had been decided the moment the first mine was confirmed in the shipping lane. The only variable was how long it took to move assets into position. By Wednesday night, they were in position. 190 miles to the east, at Jask, the 4 Khaliji Fars launchers were being loaded onto their transport erector vehicles for dispersal. Iranian doctrine called for mobile launchers to relocate every 4 to 6 hours to avoid being caught by satellite surveillance. The launchers had been photographed at their garrison at 2 p.m. By midnight, they would be gone, scattered along 80 miles of coastline, hidden under bridges, in warehouses, in the shadows of apartment buildings. Finding them after dispersal would require persistent drone surveillance and real-time intelligence that might or might not be available. The strike planners at Al-Udeid knew this. The Jask launchers had to die in their garrison before they moved. That meant the timeline just got 6 hours shorter. At 11:50 p.m. Wednesday, a pair of B-2A Spirit stealth bombers passed south of Diego Garcia heading north. They had launched from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri 17 hours earlier, refueled twice over the Atlantic, once over the Indian Ocean, and were now entering their pre-strike holding pattern. Each B-2 carried 16 GBU, 31 Joint Direct Attack munitions in its internal weapons bays. 2,000-pound GPS-guided bombs.
32 of them, total.
16 were assigned to the Jask missile garrison. 16 were assigned to the underground command bunker at Bandar Abbas that served as the IRGC Navy's operational headquarters. The B-2s were not alone. 400 miles to the west, 8 F-35A Lightning IIs from the 421st Fighter Squadron had launched from Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE at 11:30 p.m. under the cover of what was listed on the air traffic control log as a routine night training sortie. They were not carrying training weapons. Each aircraft carried 2 AGM-154 Joint Standoff weapons and 2 ALM-120D AMRAAM air-to-air missiles. Their targets were the anti-ship missile batteries on Keshem Island and Abu Musa Island, the two positions that most directly threatened mine clearance operations in the strait itself. The F-35s would strike from standoff range, roughly 40 miles from the targets, using their low observable profiles to avoid detection until weapons release. Simultaneously, the destroyer USS Nitsa, positioned 110 miles south of the strait in the Gulf of Oman, began programming 96 Tomahawk land attack missiles in her vertical launch cells. 96 missiles from a single ship. Her targets included radar sites, communication nodes, fastboat pens at 3 different harbors, and the Noor anti-ship missile battery near Sirik. The Tomahawks would fly circuitous routes, approaching their targets from unexpected directions, time to arrive within a 60-second window starting at 2:04 a.m. But the Nitsa was not the only ship launching Tomahawks. The cruiser USS Gettysburg, sailing with the Ford Carrier Group now positioned 240 miles south of the strait, had another 64 Tomahawks programmed and ready. The destroyer USS Halsey, forward deployed from Bahrain, had 47. Combined with the Nitsa, that was 207 Tomahawk cruise missiles that would be in the air before a single Iranian radar operator noticed anything unusual. 207 Tomahawks cost roughly $400 million. The coastal defense systems they were targeting had cost Iran approximately $90 million to acquire. That math looks bad until you consider that a single day of the strait being closed cost the global economy an estimated $1.2 billion. At 1:47 a.m. Thursday local time, 13 minutes before H-hour, the cyber weapons activated. The first effect was subtle. The primary radar at Iran's Kish Island air defense sector, a Chinese-supplied JY-14 medium-range surveillance radar, began receiving false returns. Not many. Not enough to trigger an alert. Just enough to place phantom aircraft tracks 80 miles south of their actual position. The radar operators saw what they expected to see: American aircraft flying patrol patterns in international airspace. They did not see the 8 F-35s that were now 70 miles closer than any Iranian sensor indicated. The second effect was less subtle. At Bandar Abbas Naval Base, the electrical grid serving the port facility and the adjacent IRGC Navy headquarters experienced a cascading voltage irregularity. It lasted 9 seconds. When power returned, the shore-based missile coordination network needed 4 minutes to reboot. 4 minutes during which no launch order could be transmitted to the fast attack boats already dispersed along the coast. 4 minutes was a long time. The third effect was invisible. Deep inside the Integrated Air Defense Command Network, the software that managed threat prioritization and engagement sequencing had been modified. Iranian surface-to-air missile batteries would still function. They would still track targets. They would still fire. But the fire control solution would contain a tiny error, a 6-degree azimuth offset in the targeting data passed from the surveillance radars to the engagement radars. 6 degrees does not sound like much. At 40 miles, 6 degrees translates to a missed distance of over 4 miles. Every missile fired using corrupted data would miss by 4 miles. And the operators would not know why. At 2 a.m. exactly, the B-2s opened their bomb bay doors. 32,000 feet above the Jask missile garrison, the first B-2 released 8 GBU-31s in a 4-second sequence. Each bomb separated cleanly, its GPS-aided inertial navigation system locking onto coordinates that had been updated 17 minutes earlier by a Global Hawk surveillance drone orbiting at 58,000 feet. The bombs fell for 41 seconds. In those 41 seconds, the 4 Khaliji Fars launchers sat on their transport vehicles, engines warming, preparing to disperse. The drivers had been told to move at 2:15 a.m. They were 15 minutes from safety. The first bomb struck the vehicle maintenance building adjacent to the launcher parking area. The blast wave knocked 2 of the transport vehicles onto their sides. The second and third bombs hit the road leading out of the garrison, cratering it in 2 places and blocking the only exit. The 4th through 8th bombs walked across the launcher positions themselves. The Khaliji Fars missiles carried solid rocket fuel. When the 2,000-pound warheads detonated among them, the secondary explosions were visible from 20 miles away. In 11 seconds, Iran's most advanced anti-ship ballistic missile capabilities ceased to exist. The second B-2 hit the Bandar Abbas command bunker 90 seconds later. The bunker was hardened, built into a hillside with reinforced concrete rated to withstand conventional munitions. The B-2 dropped its 16 bombs in 2 waves of 8, walking them across the same impact point. The first 8 cratered the surface and stripped away the overburden. The second 8 penetrated into the compromised structure. Post-strike assessment would later show that the command center was not destroyed, but it was knocked offline for over 9 hours. During those 9 hours, the IRGC Navy fought without centralized command and control. Every boat, every battery, every unit was on its own. And then the Tomahawks arrived. At 2:04 a.m., the first wave of cruise missiles crossed the Iranian coastline at 480 miles per hour, flying at altitudes between 50 and 100 feet. They came from 3 directions. From the south, the Nitz's missiles hit Keshem Island and the eastern approaches. From the southwest, the Gettysburg's missiles struck targets along the coast between Bandar Lenja and Sirik. From the southeast, the Halsey's missiles came in over the Gulf of Oman and struck Jask's remaining infrastructure and the early warning radar at Shabahar. On Keshem Island, the C-802 battery positions that the F-35s had not already destroyed received 12 Tomahawks in a single minute. The missiles arrived in pairs, 2 per target, with the second missile timed 30 seconds after the first. The first missile destroyed or suppressed the target. The second missile ensured it. Iranian soldiers who survived the strikes later described the sound as continuous thunder that did not stop. At Abu Musa Island, the garrison received 8 Tomahawks and 4 AGM-154 joint standoff weapons from the F-35s. The island's anti-ship capability consisted of 2 C-802 launchers and a single Chinese-made HQ-7 short-range air defense system. The HQ-7 actually fired. It launched 2 missiles at incoming Tomahawks and hit one out of 207. The launcher was destroyed 19 seconds later by a GBU-39 small-diameter bomb dropped by an F-35 that the HQ-7's radar never detected. 1 Tomahawk destroyed costs $1.9 million. The HQ-7 missile that killed it cost about $80,000. For Iran, That was the best exchange rate of the entire night. 40 miles north of the strait, at the IRGC fastboat base at Bandar Lenja, 11 missile-armed fast attack craft were attempting to get underway. They had received dispersal orders at 1:55 a.m., 5 minutes before H-hour, from a local commander who had noticed the communications disruption and guessed what was coming. It was good instinct. 5 of the boats made it out of the harbor before the tomahawks hit. The remaining 6 were caught in their pens. The concrete piers, the fuel storage, the ammunition bunkers, everything within 400 meters of the waterfront was destroyed in 60 seconds. The 5 boats that escaped scattered east along the coast at 45 knots, 220 miles south of the strait, aboard the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford. The air wing went to full combat operations at 2:10 a.m. The first aircraft to launch were not fighters. They were EA-18G Growlers from VAQ-129, electronic warfare aircraft. Their job was to find, jam, and if necessary destroy any Iranian radar system that was still functioning after the cyber attack and the Tomahawk strikes. Within 30 minutes, 6 Growlers were orbiting at 28,000 feet along a north-south line running parallel to the Iranian coast, flooding the electromagnetic spectrum with noise. Iranian radar operators who had survived the strikes and were attempting to bring backup systems online found nothing but static. Behind the Growlers came the fighters. F divided by a -18E and F Super Hornets armed for both air-to-air and air-to-ground. F-35C Lightning IIs from VFA-147. The Ford's air wing put 42 aircraft into the sky in the first hour. Their immediate concern was not the Iranian Air Force. The Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force had not sortied a single aircraft. Their hangars were intact. Their runways were intact. Their jets sat in shelters with engines cold. This was deliberate. The United States had not struck any Iranian air bases. The message was precise. This is about the strait. Open it, and this ends. Expand it, and we expand too. Tehran received that message. The jets stayed on the ground. That decision, made by someone in Tehran whose name may never be known, probably prevented the conflict from becoming a full-scale war. Probably. At 2:38 a.m., the 5 IRGC fastboats that had escaped Bandar Lenja reached a position 18 miles northeast of the strait and turned south. They were heading for the shipping lanes. Each boat carried 2 C-802 missiles and was crewed by 7 men. Their orders, received before communications went dark, were simple. Find an American warship. Fire. Whether they understood they were operating without air cover, without shore-based radar support, and without any coordination with other Iranian forces is unclear. They went anyway. What they did not know was that the submarine USS Montana had entered the strait 4 hours earlier and was now sitting at 200 feet, 3 miles east of the Greater Tunb Island, with her sonar focused north. The Montana had received her full mission tasking at 10 p.m. She was there specifically for this. For the fastboats. Her and /BQQ-10 sonar suite could detect the high-speed propeller cavitation of fast attack craft at ranges exceeding 20 miles. She heard them the moment they turned south. The Montana did not have authorization to engage with torpedoes. Killing the boats was not her job. Finding them was. She transmitted their positions via the underwater communication system to the Ford carrier group in a burst that lasted 1.3 seconds. 40 seconds later, the tactical action officer aboard the destroyer USS Paul Ignatius, stationed at the northern mouth of the strait, had the tracks. The Paul Ignatius carried 8 RGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles and 96 cells of vertical launch ordnance. Against 5 small boats, she used neither. Instead, the ship's MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, already airborne on patrol, was vectored to intercept. The helicopter carried 4 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles and an M2 40-door gun. It found the 5 boats in a loose formation, running without lights, making 42 knots on a heading that would bring them within missile range of the Paul Ignatius in roughly 23 minutes. The Seahawk fired 2 Hellfires at the lead boat. Both hit. The boat disintegrated. A $114,000 missile against a craft worth maybe $200,000. Close enough to even. The 4 remaining boats split. 2 turned east, 2 turned west. The helicopter pursued the eastern pair, while the Paul Ignatius launched a second Seahawk for the western pair. Over the next 14 minutes, all 4 boats were destroyed. 3 by Hellfire missiles. 1 by 30mm cannon fire from the second helicopter. Not a single C-802 was launched. 35 Iranian sailors died in those 14 minutes. They had never seen the ships they were trying to attack. In those same 14 minutes, mine clearance operations began. The 4 Avenger-class minesweepers had been holding position 12 miles south of the strait, waiting for the word. At 2:50 a.m., with the immediate anti-ship threat suppressed, they advanced into the eastern approach channel at 6 knots. Ahead of them, MH-53EC Dragon helicopters from HM-15 towed Mk-105 magnetic influence sleds through the water, simulating the magnetic signature of a large vessel. The idea was simple: trigger the influence mines before a real ship found them. Each triggered mine produced a geyser of water visible from miles away. In the first hour, the helicopters triggered 11 mines.
11 down.
Roughly 289 to go. Simultaneously, the Kingfish UUVs that had arrived from Ramstein were deployed from a support vessel at the western approach. These autonomous underwater drones used side-scan sonar to map the seabed and identify mine-like objects, then transmitted the coordinates to EOD teams following behind. The Kingfish drones worked slowly. Each one could survey roughly 1 square mile per hour. The Strait's shipping lanes covered approximately 42 square miles. The math was not encouraging. At 4:15 a.m., roughly 2 hours into the operation, Iran responded. Not with missiles.
Not with boats. With mines.
2 Goddard-class midget submarines, each roughly 120 feet long and carrying a crew of 18, had been lying on the bottom of the strait in 40 meters of water since Monday. They had not moved. They had not transmitted. They had been invisible. Now they began deploying additional mines directly into the clearance corridor. The first indication came when a Kingfish UUV detected a mine that had not been on the previous scan pass.
Then a second. Then a third.
Someone at the Mine Warfare Command Center aboard the USS Lewis B. Puller did the math and realized that the minefield was growing faster than they were clearing it. That realization landed on the Combined Force Commander's desk at 4:22 a.m. Finding a midget submarine in shallow, warm water cluttered with shipwrecks, pipelines, and natural formations is one of the hardest problems in naval warfare. The Goddard-class boats were diesel-electric, nearly silent on battery power, and small enough to hide behind geological features. The Montana could hear fast boats from 20 miles away. A quiet submarine sitting on the bottom at 40 meters might as well not exist. But the Navy had something for this. 2 P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft from VP-10 had been orbiting south of the strait since midnight. Each carried sonobuoy dispensers loaded with and /SSQ-125 multi-static active sonobuoys. Unlike passive sonobuoys that just listen, active sonobuoys create their own sound pulses and listen for the returns. They do not wait for the submarine to make noise. They find it anyway. The trade-off is that the submarine knows it is being hunted. At this point, subtlety was no longer a priority. At 4:31 a.m., the 2 P-8s dropped a pattern of 64 sonobuoys across the central strait. The acoustic coverage was dense enough to detect an object the size of a refrigerator. A Goddard-class submarine is considerably larger than a refrigerator. The first submarine was detected at 4:38 a.m., sitting on the bottom 2.7 miles north-northwest of the clearance corridor. It was not moving. The P-8 dropped a Mk-54 lightweight torpedo. The torpedo entered the water, acquired the contact, and detonated against the submarine's hull at 4:39 a.m. There were no survivors. The second submarine heard the detonation and did something its crew probably knew was futile. It started its engines and ran. At 8 knots, heading east, trying to escape into deeper water. The noise gave it away instantly. The second P-8 dropped a Mk-54 at 4:44 a.m. The torpedo hit the submarine at 4:45 a.m.
18 more men gone.
A Goddard-class submarine costs approximately $40 million to build. A Mk-54 torpedo costs roughly $700,000. 2 torpedoes, $1.4 million. 2 submarines, $80 million. The exchange rate was not in Iran's favor. With the submarine threat neutralized, mine clearance accelerated. By 6 a.m. Thursday, 4 hours into the operation, 38 mines had been swept or neutralized. By 9 a.m., the number was 71. By noon, it was 112. The pace was increasing as crews developed better understanding of Iranian mine-laying patterns. The mines were not randomly distributed. They had been placed along predictable lines designed to cover the shipping lanes at regular intervals. Once you found the pattern, you knew where to look next. At 11 a.m. Thursday, exactly 12 hours before the original deadline expired, the Combined Force Commander declared a safe corridor through the strait. It was narrow, 600 meters wide and 31 miles long. It was not a permanent solution.
It was a keyhole, but a keyhole was enough.
At 11:47 a.m., the first vessel transited the corridor. It was not a warship. It was not a tanker. It was the container ship MSC Aurora, Panamanian flagged, carrying 14,000 shipping containers from Singapore to Rotterdam. She was escorted by the destroyer USS Fitzgerald on her port side and the British frigate HMS Richmond on her starboard side. Both warships had their phalanx close-in weapon systems active, their electronic warfare suites radiating, and their crews at general quarters. The transit took 2 hours and 14 minutes. The MSC Aurora's master later described it as the most stressful transit of his 30-year career. But she made it through. Behind her, 16 more vessels were queued. Commercial satellite imagery showed another 43 anchored at Fujairah, waiting. At 1 p.m. Thursday, Iranian state television broadcast a statement from the Supreme National Security Council. It did not mention the word surrender. It did not mention the word defeat. It said that Iran had demonstrated its ability to close the strait and would do so again if provoked. It said that mine clearance was a violation of Iranian sovereign waters. It said many things. But buried in the 7th paragraph was a single sentence stating that the IRGC Navy had been ordered to cease offensive operations in the Strait of Hormuz pending a review of the military situation. That sentence was the white flag, written in bureaucratic Persian and buried where they hoped nobody would notice. By Thursday night, mine clearance operations had expanded the safe corridor to 2 miles wide. American, British, French, and Australian minesweepers were working side by side. The Royal Navy had dispatched the Hunt-class mine countermeasure vessels HMS Ledbury and HMS Penzance from Bahrain. The French frigate Alsace had arrived to provide air defense coverage. The Australians sent a P-8 from their detachment in the UAE. The cost accounting, when someone eventually did it, was staggering. The United States had expended 207 Tomahawk cruise missiles, 32 dams, 16 joint standoff weapons, 12 small diameter bombs, 11 Hellfire missiles, 2 lightweight torpedoes, and approximately 40,000 pounds of miscellaneous ordnance. Total munitions cost was estimated at $480 million. Aircraft operating costs, ship operating costs, and logistics for the 48-hour operation added another $300 million. The cyber implants that had been burned were valued internally at an estimated program cost of $1.2 billion over the 6 years they had been developed and maintained. Total cost to the United States, approximately $2 billion. Iran's losses included 4 Khaliji Fars ballistic anti-ship missile launchers, 11 coastal defense C-802 batteries, 6 fast attack craft destroyed in port, 5 at sea, 2 Goddard-class submarines, its IRGC Navy headquarters line for 9 hours, 60% of its Gulf-facing radar infrastructure, and its mine capability in the strait reduced by 112 weapons. With clearance operations continuing. Estimated replacement cost for Iran, $6 to $8 billion and 4 to 7 years. The global economy had lost an estimated $9 billion during the 3 days the strait was fully closed. Oil prices, which had spiked $31 per barrel, dropped $18 within 6 hours of the first successful transit and another $9 over the following 48 hours. The Strait of Hormuz carries roughly 21 million barrels of oil per day. That is 21% of global petroleum consumption. It is the single most important maritime choke point on Earth. Iran had closed it with 300 mines that cost a combined total of roughly $3 million. $3 million held the world economy hostage for 72 hours. That is a return on investment that no weapons system in history has ever matched. And somewhere in Tehran, someone was already ordering 300 more. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other video on what would happen if Iran sank a US aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. Bye for now. The aircraft carrier was already on fire. Not from a missile. Not from a drone. From a fuel line rupture on the hangar deck that had nothing to do with Iran and everything to do with a 19-year-old aviation bosun's mate who cross-threaded a coupling during a 14-hour shift. The fire was out in 90 seconds. Damage was cosmetic, but for 11 minutes, the strike launch cycle froze, and during those 11 minutes, the thing that was supposed to stay classified for another 6 months rolled out of a C-5M Galaxy's cargo bay at Al Udeid Air Base and onto a runway that had been cleared of every aircraft, every vehicle, and every human being without a Yankee White clearance. The ground crew called it the coffin, not because of what it looked like, but because of what it did to anything on the other end. Officially, it doesn't have a name. The program designation is an alphanumeric string that even the pilots aren't briefed on. What the mission planners called it, in the only unclassified reference that would ever exist, was Longbow 6. A unmanned low observable penetration vehicle built around a single purpose: deliver a weapon package deep inside integrated air defense networks that would shred anything else the United States owns. Iran had spent 11 years and somewhere north of $9 billion building those networks. Russian S-300 PMU-2 batteries around Isfahan. Domestically produced Bavar 373 units ringing Tehran. Third Khordad medium-range systems layered between them like concentric walls. And in the gaps, hundreds of mobile short-range systems, Tor M1 vehicles bought from Moscow before the sanctions bit, and Iranian-built Arayad systems that nobody in Western intelligence had fully characterized because Tehran had never turned them on during an exercise long enough for the satellites to map their full capability. The Pentagon had wargamed a strike on Iran's nuclear enrichment infrastructure every year since 2007. Every simulation produced the same result. You could get aircraft into Iranian airspace. You could hit targets. But you would lose between 14 and 31 aircraft doing it, depending on the scenario, and that number assumed Iran didn't have anything hidden that the intelligence community had missed. It always did. Longbow 6 was supposed to change the math. The vehicle had been in testing at Groom Lake for 3 years. Wingspan of roughly 45 feet. No vertical stabilizer. A planform so clean that the radar cross-section, measured in a purpose-built anechoic chamber at a facility that doesn't appear on any map, came back smaller than a hummingbird at certain frequencies. The airframe absorbed radar energy the way a black shirt absorbs sunlight. What it didn't absorb, it scattered in directions that never returned to the emitter. It carried no gun, no air-to-air capability, no defensive systems in the traditional sense. What it carried, slung internally in a weapons bay lined with radar-absorbent baffles, was a payload that 3 separate congressional oversight committees had been told did not exist. The weapon was called, in development documents later leaked to a defense journal that published 2 paragraphs before receiving a national security letter, a spectrally adaptive electromagnetic disruption package. What that meant in plain language was this. It mapped the operating frequencies of every radar and communication system within a given radius, computed the precise waveform needed to not just jam but permanently damage the receiver electronics of each one simultaneously, and then delivered that waveform in a shape pulse timed to the microsecond.
Not a bomb. Not a missile.
A directed energy event that turned an integrated air defense network into a very expensive collection of paperweights. The physics weren't new. The concept of burning out radar receivers with targeted electromagnetic energy dates back to the late Cold War. What was new was the ability to do it to dozens of systems operating on different frequency bands at the same time, from a single airborne platform, without the platform being detectable before, during, or after the pulse. Iran's air defense doctrine depended on one assumption, that any attacker would have to physically destroy radars and launchers with missiles, one at a time, in a sequence that could be tracked, predicted, and countered. The entire layered defense was built around redundancy. Kill one radar and the adjacent unit picks up coverage. Kill that one and a mobile backup relocates from a camouflaged revetment. The system was designed to bleed an attacker dry through attrition, forcing them to expend hundreds of cruise missiles and dozens of sorties just to open a corridor. Longbow 6 didn't need a corridor. It needed 12 seconds over the target area. At 0347 local time, the vehicle launched from Al Udeid on a trajectory that took it south over the Gulf of Oman, east toward the Pakistani border, and then north into Iranian airspace from a vector that Iran's coastal radar network wasn't optimized to cover. The southern and western approaches to Iran are where the threat lives. That's where the S-300 batteries face. That's where the search radars concentrate their scan volumes. The eastern border with Pakistan and Afghanistan is mountainous, remote, and covered primarily by aging early warning systems that Iran has never fully modernized because the threat from that direction has historically been smugglers and narcotics traffickers, not stealth aircraft. Longbow 6 entered Iranian airspace at 58,000 feet, above the ceiling of every interceptor in the Iranian Air Force inventory. The MiG-29s top out around 55,000 in a clean configuration. The F-14 Tomcats, the ones still flying, haven't reliably reached 50,000 since the mid-90s. And the domestically produced Kausar fighter, which Tehran had paraded on television with great fanfare, had a combat ceiling that classified U.S. assessments placed at 45,000 feet on a good day with a tailwind and a prayer. The vehicle crossed the Zagros Mountains at a point where 2 radar coverage zones met. There's always a seam. No radar network on Earth has perfect, seamless coverage because the planet is curved, the terrain is uneven, and electromagnetic waves travel in straight lines. Mountains create shadows. Valleys create dead zones. Longbow 6 flight path had been computed to thread every one of them. 300 miles inside Iranian airspace, the first radar painted the vehicle. A Nebo SVU VHF system, one of the newer Russian exports, operating in a frequency band that low observable aircraft are historically more vulnerable to. VHF radars have longer wavelengths, which means stealth shaping designed to deflect higher frequency X-band and S-band signals becomes less effective. This was the system that Iran's defense establishment had publicly claimed could detect any stealth aircraft the United States operated. The Nebo screen showed a return.
Intermittent. Ambiguous.
The operator saw it for 4 sweeps, roughly 8 seconds, then lost it. He flagged it in the system. Standard procedure. The track entered the network as a tentative contact, unconfirmed, bearing 047, range 180 kilometers, altitude unknown. Now here's where doctrine collides with reality. Iran's Integrated Air Defense Command operates on a hierarchical model. Sector commanders receive tracks from multiple radar sites, correlate them, and make engagement decisions. A single tentative contact from one radar isn't enough to trigger a launch. You need correlation from a second source. The S-300's own engagement radar, the 30N62, operating in X-band, scanned the bearing. Nothing. The third Chordad's phased array swept the same sector. Nothing. The Bavar 373's long-range search radar, which Iran claimed could track stealth targets at 300 kilometers, reported nothing.
1 radar saw it, 4 didn't.
The sector commander had to decide whether to reposition mobile assets based on a ghost return that had already faded. Repositioning meant taking units offline during transit. It meant breaking the coverage web to chase a contact that was probably atmospheric clutter or a flock of birds at altitude. He chose to log it and continue normal operations. Longbow 6 was 140 kilometers from the first target. The weapon's employment sequence began automatically 90 seconds before the optimal release point. Sensors in the vehicle's belly, passive receivers that detected radar emissions the way an ear detects sound without making any noise of its own, began cataloging every electromagnetic source within a 200-kilometer radius. Frequencies, pulse repetition intervals, scan rates, side lobe patterns. Each system had a signature as unique as a fingerprint, and the weapon's onboard processor was matching those fingerprints against a library that contained every known Russian, Chinese, and Iranian radar system's operating parameters. The library had been built over decades. Every time an Iranian radar turned on during an exercise, satellites recorded it. Every time a Russian system was exported and tested by its new operator, signals intelligence aircraft orbiting in international airspace captured the emissions. The library wasn't perfect. Some systems had been modified, some had firmware updates that shifted parameters. But the processor didn't need perfection. It needed to be close enough to compute a waveform that would couple with the target radar's receiver architecture and deliver energy in a pattern the receiver couldn't reject. Think of it like this. Every radio receiver is designed to listen for a specific type of signal. It amplifies that signal and filters out everything else. The weapon computed a signal so precisely matched to each receiver's acceptance parameters that the receiver would amplify it eagerly, the way a microphone amplifies the sound of a hand clap. Except this sound was loud enough to burn the amplifier out permanently. At 0411, Longbow 6 reached the release point. The vehicle was directly over the Natanz enrichment complex at 57,000 feet. Below it, arranged in concentric rings, were 3 S-300 PMU-2 batteries, 2 Bavar 373 units, 4 third Chordad systems, an unknown number of Tor M1 vehicles in camouflage positions, and a RAAD battery that US intelligence had only confirmed the existence of 6 weeks earlier, when a satellite caught the launcher covers being removed during what appeared to be a maintenance cycle. The weapons bay opened for 1.3 seconds. The device that dropped was not a bomb in any conventional sense. It had no explosive warhead. It had no fragmentation case. What it had was an array of phased emitters powered by a capacitor bank that stored enough energy to run a small town for about a tenth of a second and released all of it in a shaped electromagnetic pulse calibrated to the specific systems below. The device functioned at 41,000 feet, still well above the engagement envelope of every short-range system on the ground. On the S-300's 30N62 engagement radar, the pulse arrived as a signal indistinguishable from a legitimate return, amplified through the receiver chain, and overloaded the front-end low-noise amplifier in a cascade that propagated through the signal processing boards like electrical fire through dry timber. The system didn't explode. It didn't smoke. The screen simply went dark, and when the operators attempted to restart, the system reported a fault code that wasn't in the manual because the failure mode had never been anticipated by the designers. The Bavar 373 died the same way. Different frequency, different waveform, same result. The phased array elements, hundreds of individual transmit-receive modules, each received a pulse tuned to their specific operating band. 31% of the modules failed instantly. The system's built-in redundancy was designed to handle up to 20% module loss before degradation became operationally significant. At 31%, the radar's beam couldn't form properly. It could see the sky the way a person sees the world through a shattered windshield. Shapes, light, movement, but no resolution, no track, no fire control solution. The third Chordad systems experienced something different and in some ways worse. The pulse didn't kill the radar outright. It corrupted the signal processing software by introducing false data through the receiver that the system interpreted as legitimate contacts. The screens lit up with hundreds of tracks, a swarm of phantom aircraft that didn't exist, each one triggering engagement protocols that the operators couldn't override fast enough. The system began auto-cycling between targets, slewing the antenna to track contacts that vanished the moment it looked at them and reappeared the moment it looked away. The third Chordad wasn't dead. It was hallucinating. And in the confusion, the sector commander's data feed turned into noise. Every unit reporting something different. The S-300 reporting total failure. The Bavar reporting degraded capability. The third Chordad reporting mass air attack from all quadrants simultaneously. And the Nebo SVU, the one radar that had actually seen Longbow 6 4 minutes earlier, was now the only functional search radar in the sector, and its operator was screaming into a radio net clogged with overlapping damage reports that nobody could prioritize. The Tor M1 vehicles, short-range point defense systems mounted on tracked chassis, were the only assets unaffected. Their radars operated in a frequency band that the weapons library had incomplete data for. A Russian-supplied firmware update 8 months earlier had shifted the Tor's operating parameters just enough that the pulse didn't couple with the receivers cleanly.
The Tor could still see. The Tor could still shoot.
But the Tor has a maximum engagement range of 12 kilometers and a ceiling of roughly 20,000 feet, and Longbow 6 was at 57,000 feet and already egressing. Below the electronic carnage, the Natanz complex sat untouched.
No crater, no debris,
no visible damage of any kind. The centrifuges were still spinning. The buildings were still standing. From the ground, looking up, nothing appeared to have happened at all.
This was the point.
Longbow 6 didn't strike Natanz. It stripped Natanz naked. The air defense network that had been built over a decade to make the complex untouchable was now a collection of broken receivers, confused processors, and operators staring at screens that either showed nothing or showed everything.
And the window wouldn't last. Iran had spare parts. Iran had technicians.
The S-300's receiver modules could be replaced in somewhere between 12 and 72 hours depending on supply chain status. The Bavar's phased array modules would take longer, possibly weeks, because domestically produced components had quality control issues that meant a significant percentage of replacement modules would fail during installation. But the window was open now. At Al Udeid, the second phase was already moving. 47 minutes after Longbow 6 device detonated, a wave of BGM-109 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in the Gulf of Oman. The missiles flew a southern route, hugging terrain through Balochistan, entering Iranian airspace through the same eastern corridor that Longbow 6 had used. They carried Broach warheads, a dual-stage penetrator designed to punch through hardened concrete and detonate inside buried structures. Their targets were not the centrifuge halls. Those were too deep, too hardened, and the Tomahawk's warhead wasn't heavy enough to reach them. Their targets were the support infrastructure, the power distribution nodes, the cooling systems, the uranium hexafluoride feed stations, and the cascade connection piping that linked the centrifuge halls to the above-ground processing facilities. Without cooling, centrifuges overheat. Without feed stations, they have nothing to enrich. Without connection piping, the product has nowhere to go. You don't need to destroy the centrifuges if you can destroy everything that keeps them running. The Tomahawks entered the degraded air defense zone at 550 miles per hour and 50 feet above the terrain. The S-300 couldn't see them because the S-300 couldn't see anything. The Bavar's fragmented array detected 3 of the 47 missiles but couldn't generate a fire control solution because the beam couldn't focus. The third Cordad software was still chasing phantoms and couldn't distinguish real cruise missiles from the hundreds of false tracks already saturating its display. The Tor M1 cruise, the only functioning air defense in the sector, detected the first Tomahawk at 9 kilometers.
They launched.
The 9M331 missile accelerated to Mach 2.8 and intercepted at 4 kilometers.
Direct hit.
The Tomahawk disintegrated in a fireball that the Tor's crew celebrated for approximately 3 seconds before the second Tomahawk passed 400 meters to the south, below the Tor's minimum engagement altitude, and impacted the primary electrical substation serving the enrichment complex. The lights at Natanz went out. A second Tor crew engaged 2 more Tomahawks and killed one. The other struck the cooling water intake manifold. A third Tor, repositioning to cover the southern approach, drove into a drainage ditch that didn't appear on its 2009 vintage navigation database and through a track. The crew spent the next 40 minutes conducting field repairs while cruise missiles passed overhead. 43 of 47 Tomahawks reached their targets. 4 intercepted by Tor systems. 0 intercepted by any other air defense asset in the sector. The damage assessment came from a satellite pass 90 minutes later. 3 of 4 power distribution nodes destroyed. Cooling system intake demolished. 2 of 3 feed stations hit. 1 confirmed destroyed. 1 with structural damage that analysis suggested would require 6 to 8 months to repair. The cascade connection piping, running in above-ground conduits between buildings, had been shredded by blast fragmentation from near misses on adjacent structures. Not targeted directly, but destroyed by proximity.
Natanz was intact.
Every building was still standing. The centrifuges were still in their halls, thousands of them, spinning in the dark in the heat, with no power, no cooling, and no feed material. They would spin for a while on residual momentum.
Then they would stop. Some would crash.
Bearings seize when centrifuges spinning at 60,000 revolutions per minute lose their magnetic suspension. The repair timeline for crashed centrifuges isn't measured in weeks. It's measured in years, because Iran manufactures them domestically at a rate that US intelligence estimates at somewhere between 100 and 200 per month, and the complex held more than 5,300 miles northwest. The same sequence was unfolding at Fordow, the enrichment facility buried under a mountain near Qom. A second Longbow 6 vehicle had entered from the north, threading the Alborz mountain passes where radar coverage was thinnest, and delivered its payload over the facility at 0419. Fordow's air defenses, a mix of Bavar 373 and domestically produced systems, experienced the same cascade of failures. The follow-on Tomahawk strike from a Virginia-class submarine in the Arabian Sea hit Fordow's tunnel entrances, ventilation shafts, and the power grid serving the mountain complex. You can't tomahawk a mountain, the rock wins, but you can seal the entrances with rubble, destroy the ventilation that keeps the air breathable for the workers inside, and cut the power that runs the centrifuges. Fordow became a tomb for machines. Everything inside was physically intact and operationally useless. Tehran learned about Natanz from the sector commander's fragmented damage report at 0438. Tehran learned about Fordow when the facility stopped responding to communications at 0441. The Supreme National Security Council convened at 0502. By 0515, the order went out to activate retaliatory assets. Iran's response doctrine for a major strike on nuclear infrastructure had been rehearsed for years. The Ballistic Missile Force, operated by the IRGC Aerospace Force, maintained a standing order to launch against predetermined targets in the Gulf states and Israel within 90 minutes of confirmed attack on nuclear sites. Shahab-3 medium-range ballistic missiles in hardened silos and mobile launchers. Ahmad and Gadra variants with improved accuracy, and the newer Khaibar-Shikan, a solid-fueled medium-range missile that Iran had tested in 2023 and which Western analysts assessed could reach any point in Israel with a circular error probable of less than 30 meters. The launchers began their pre-launch sequences at 0520, and this is where the second thing that wasn't supposed to exist entered the picture. The US had repositioned 2 THAAD batteries to the Gulf region over the preceding weeks, along with Patriot PAC-3 MSE batteries at multiple locations. Standard defensive posture. What wasn't standard was the asset orbiting at 65,000 feet over western Iraq in a racetrack pattern that it had been flying for 19 hours without refueling. The platform had no official designation in any public document. Ground crews at its operating base referred to it as the Overwatch. It carried a sensor suite that could detect the infrared bloom of a ballistic missile launch within 2 seconds and a communications package that transmitted targeting data directly to Aegis-equipped ships and THAAD batteries faster than Iran's missiles could clear their boost phase. But detection wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was the directed energy system mounted in a conformal housing along the platform's fuselage, not the airborne laser of the early 2000s. The 747 mounted chemical laser that cost $5 billion and was cancelled because it had to fly within 200 kilometers of the launch site to be effective. This was a fiber-coupled solid-state system that the Missile Defense Agency had been developing in a program so classified that its budget was hidden inside the construction line item for a facility in Alabama that had been completed 4 years earlier. The system couldn't destroy a ballistic missile. The energy density at range wasn't sufficient to burn through a missile's skin in the 60 to 90 seconds of boost phase. But it could do something more elegant. It could heat the missile's guidance section, just enough to degrade the inertial navigation system's ring laser gyroscopes. The gyroscopes measure rotation by detecting the phase shift between 2 laser beams traveling in opposite directions around a closed loop. Heat the housing by even a few degrees and the thermal expansion changes the path length. The phase shift drifts. The missile thinks it's on course when it's not. By the time it reaches the terminal phase, the accumulated error translates to hundreds of meters of missed distance on a target that the missile's designers assumed would be hit within 30. At 0534, the first Shahab-3 launched from a site in western Kermanshah province. The Overwatch detected the plume at 0534 and 2 seconds. The directed energy system engaged at 0534 and 9 seconds, maintaining a focused beam on the guidance section for the 47 seconds of boost phase visible above the horizon line. The missile climbed through the atmosphere on what appeared to be a normal trajectory. It entered its mid-course phase. It followed a ballistic arc toward a target in the Gulf, and the gyroscopes, heated just enough to introduce a drift rate of 0.003 degrees per second, accumulated an error that by re-entry translated to 1,100 meters of missed distance. The Patriot PAC-3 battery at its intended target tracked the incoming missile, computed an intercept, and launched. The interceptor killed the Shahab at 15 kilometers altitude. Standard engagement. But the Shahab had already been dead. Even without the Patriot, it would have impacted in open desert over a kilometer from anything that mattered. 5 more Shahab-3s launched in rapid succession from dispersed mobile launchers. The Overwatch engaged each one during boost phase. 3 were subsequently intercepted by Patriot and THAAD. 2 were not intercepted because the defense batteries assessed them as non-threats based on their predicted impact points, which the degraded guidance had shifted into empty terrain. Iran launched 19 ballistic missiles over the next 3 hours. 11 were intercepted by missile defense systems. 8 were not intercepted. Of the 8 that completed their flights, 0 hit their intended targets. The closest impact to a populated area was 740 meters from the perimeter fence of a desalination plant in Bahrain. The farthest was 6 kilometers into the empty quarter of Saudi Arabia, where it created a crater that would eventually be discovered by a Bedouin herder who would assume it was an old ordnance test. Tehran's missile force had spent years and billions developing the capability to overwhelm regional missile defenses through volume. The doctrine assumed that even if 50 or 60% of missiles were intercepted, the remainder would hit with enough accuracy to cause unacceptable damage. The doctrine did not account for the possibility that every missile that penetrated the defense shield would miss anyway, because the guidance had been corrupted during the one phase of flight where the missile was most vulnerable and least defended. The JAR-GC Aerospace Force Commander reviewed the impact reports at 0830. 19 launches. 0 confirmed hits on any designated target. He ordered a second salvo. The technicians reported that the mobile launchers needed 4 to 6 hours to reload and relocate. The fixed sites had been hit by a second wave of Tomahawks while the first salvo was still in the air. By noon, Iran's ballistic missile force had expended its ready inventory of medium-range missiles and achieved nothing. The air defense network around its most critical nuclear facilities was inoperable. The enrichment infrastructure at Natanz and Fordow was functionally destroyed without a single bomb having penetrated the actual centrifuge halls. And somewhere over Iraq, an aircraft that Iran's intelligence services had no knowledge of was still circling, waiting for the next launch that wouldn't come. The international response was immediate and predictable. Condemnation from expected quarters. Back-channel communications through Oman. Oil futures spiked 14% at opening and then settled to 8% by close as the market realized the Strait of Hormuz was still open and Iran's retaliatory capability appeared to have been a fraction of what everyone had assumed. The classified after-action review, which would eventually be briefed to the president and a total of 11 other people, contained one assessment that the participants would later describe as the most significant conclusion. The operation had demonstrated that the United States possessed the capability to suppress a peer-level integrated air defense network, strike-hardened infrastructure, and defeat a ballistic missile counterattack simultaneously, without a single manned aircraft entering contested airspace and without a single American service member being placed at risk. The briefing slide that summarized this conclusion contained 6 words that none of the 11 people in the room would ever repeat publicly. The slide read, "Deterrence has been replaced by denial." And somewhere in Tehran, an air defense commander was staring at a maintenance request for S-300 receiver modules that Russia could no longer supply because of its own war, and realizing that the system his country had spent a decade building had been rendered irrelevant in 12 seconds by a weapon he still didn't understand and couldn't prove existed. At 0347 local time, a single Nor anti-ship cruise missile dropped off the rail of a mobile coastal defense launcher hidden inside a warehouse on the southern Iranian coastline and turned south toward the Strait of Hormuz. The missile was a Chinese-designed C-802 built under Iranian license, a sea-skimming weapon carrying a 365-pound warhead at roughly 660 miles per hour, just under the speed of sound. It cost the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy approximately $120,000 to produce. The target it was aimed at sat 38 nautical miles to the southwest, a gray silhouette barely visible on radar against the commercial clutter of one of the busiest shipping lanes on Earth. Iranian intelligence had classified the contact as a logistics support vessel, a slow-moving, lightly armed supply ship operating ahead of a carrier strike group transiting east through the strait. They had classified it wrong. The ship sitting at the end of that missile's flight path was the USS Robert Smalls, an Arleigh Burke-class Flight 3 guided missile destroyer carrying 96 vertical launch cells, the Spy-6 air and missile defense radar, 2 independent fire control channels, and a crew that had spent the last 11 months deployed in the 5th Fleet area of operations. Her combat systems alone were worth more than $900 million. The Nor missile racing toward her had been built for roughly the price of a mid-range sedan. That math was about to matter in a way nobody in Tehran had planned for. 12 miles north of the destroyer, aboard a 47-foot Paycap-class fast attack craft designated Bandar 1, a crew of 6 Iranian sailors watched a handheld GPS track update and believed the night was going exactly as briefed. Their mission was straightforward. 3 fast attack craft would close from spread positions under emissions control, while the shore-based missile battery initiated the strike. The missile would force the target into defensive confusion. The boats would exploit the confusion to press inside 8 nautical miles and release their own weapons, a coordinated saturation attack against a vessel they expected to have no meaningful ability to fight back. 900 meters to port, Bandar 2 held formation in the dark. A third craft, Bandar 3, ran wider to the east, tasked with cutting off any escape route toward Omani waters 22 miles to the south. The plan was built on speed, darkness, and the assumption that the target could not see them coming. In the Combat Information Center of the Robert Smalls, 24 feet below the waterline, an operations specialist second class was the first to see the anomaly. A brief radar return appeared and vanished near the Iranian coast, inconsistent with the established shipping tracks her team had been monitoring for the previous 6 hours. She flagged it without drama. The symbol was tentative, possibly a fishing vessel launching late, possibly sea clutter bouncing off a Dow's metal hull. But the bearing was wrong for either explanation, and the operator knew it. The tactical action officer leaned in. He studied the contact for 4 seconds, then keyed the net. All stations, new track of interest bearing 028, classification pending. Increase sensor sweep rate sectors 2 and 3. Nobody in CIC raised their voice. The ship had been at a heightened readiness condition since entering the strait 90 minutes earlier. Every console was manned. Every system was warmed and calibrated. The SBY-6 radar, the most advanced shipboard sensor the United States Navy had ever put to sea, was already scanning a volume of airspace and surface territory that covered more than 2 million cubic miles of the surrounding environment. If something moved within 200 nautical miles in any direction, the Robert Smalls could find it, name it, and assign it a track number before the object had traveled its own length twice. The Nor missile was now 30 nautical miles out and descending toward its terminal approach altitude, roughly 15 feet above the water. At that height, the weapon was designed to hide inside sea clutter, invisible to older radars until the final seconds before impact. Against the Spy-6, the tactic bought the missile approximately 9 additional seconds of concealment. That was all. Track 7021 now classified as cruise missile threat, the Air Defense Coordinator announced.
Inbound, single body, sea skimmer.
Speed 570 knots.
Bearing constant.
The captain arrived in CIC the way captains always arrive in CIC during a real event, already informed, already calm, already reading the room before the room had time to brief him. He absorbed the display in a single sweep. 1 inbound missile. 3 surface contacts now firming in the northern arc emission patterns consistent with IRGC naval coordination frequencies. He looked at his tactical action officer and asked the only question that mattered right then. What's our best intercept layer for this profile? The answer came back clean. SM-2 block IIC at range. Yes, SM block 2 at medium. CRAM as terminal backstop. We have 3 layers before it gets within a mile. An SM-2 block IIC interceptor cost the United States Navy approximately $2.1 million per round. The missile it was about to kill had cost Iran $120,000. Somewhere in a Pentagon procurement office, someone was going to read this report and feel their budget request write itself. Weapons free on track 7021, the captain ordered. The forward vertical launch system answered 3 seconds later. A standard missile, 2 punched out of its cell in an eruption of white smoke and orange flame, cleared the ship's superstructure and pitched over hard toward the northeast. The missile accelerated to over 2,300 miles per hour inside 6 seconds, riding a continuous wave illumination beam that the ship's fire control director held on the inbound Nor with surgical steadiness. The intercept geometry was textbook. The SM-2 met the Nor 14 nautical miles from the ship at an altitude of 22 feet. The Iranian missile ceased to exist. Debris scattered across a quarter mile of dark water. No fragment came within 12 nautical miles of the destroyer. Splash track 7021.
Kill confirmed.
But the night was not finished because what the crew of the Robert Smalls did not yet know was that the missile had not been the main attack. It had been the door opener. The ARGC's real weapon was already in the water and closing fast. 26 miles to the north, aboard Bandar 1, the crew had watched the missile launch signature bloom on their horizon and started their clocks. The plan called for 90 seconds of confusion aboard the target following missile impact. 90 seconds during which the target's crew would be fighting fire, assessing damage, redirecting sensors inward rather than outward. That was the window. The 3 attack craft were supposed to use it to cover the final distance and launch their own ordnance, a combined salvo of 6 Nasser 1 short-range anti-ship missiles at a defenseless, burning ship. Instead, the Nor had died 14 miles from the target, and the confusion window had never opened. Bandar 1's commander made a decision in the dark that would define the rest of the engagement. He ordered full speed ahead. All 3 craft surged to maximum power, their twin diesels pushing 47-foot hulls to 52 knots across black water, throwing rooster tails of white spray into the moonless air behind them. The sound alone would have been audible from miles away if anyone had been listening above the surface. Below the surface, in the acoustic quiet of the Robert Smalls sonar room, the sudden bloom of high-speed propeller cavitation lit up the display like someone had switched on a flashlight in a dark hallway. 3 high-speed surface contacts, bearing 015 through 042, converging, speed 52 knots and accelerating. The tactical picture in CIC updated itself in a cascade. The missile had been one problem. This was a different kind of problem entirely. Fast attack craft operating in a swarm profile were not engaged the same way as a single inbound cruise missile. They were closer, faster to maneuver, harder to track individually in sea clutter, and capable of launching independently from multiple angles. If even one of those boats reached effective Nasser 1 range, roughly 22 miles, the destroyer would face a new inbound salvo with less reaction time and a more complex engagement geometry. The captain studied the converging tracks for 2 seconds.
Launch the Hello.
I want eyes on every one of those contacts before they cross 20 miles. On the flight deck, the MH-60R Seahawk had been turning rotors at idle for the past 9 minutes, held back during the missile engagement, ready for exactly this order.
Chocks pulled, ties released.
The aircraft lifted into black air and banked hard to the north, climbing to 200 feet before leveling off and pushing toward the threat sector with its APS-153 multimode radar already painting the sea ahead. The helicopter crew acquired Bondar 1 inside 40 seconds. Infrared bloom off the engines was unmistakable against the cold water. Then Bondar 2, 900 meters to its west. Then Bondar 3, running wider to the east, trying to swing around to the destroyer's beam. Inside CIC, the picture was now fully built. 3 hostile fast attack craft in a spread formation, closing from the north at 52 knots. 1 inbound cruise missile already destroyed. Shore-based targeting emissions still active along the Iranian coast. The attack was coordinated, deliberate, and ongoing. What the Iranian crews did not understand, could not have understood from their position low on the water in an open cockpit boat doing 52 knots in the dark, was that the ship they were charging had already killed their opening move and was now reading their second move in real time. The Robert Smalls was not confused. She was not burning. She was not blind. She was tracking every one of them with a radar system that could distinguish a single human standing on a boat deck from the boat itself at 40 miles. Their entire plan had been built on the assumption that they would arrive at a scene of chaos. They were arriving instead at a firing range. Bondar 1, the lead craft, crossed the 20 nautical mile threshold at 0353. In CIC, the Air Defense Coordinator confirmed the track had entered the outer engagement envelope for the ship's weapons systems. The Seahawk crew simultaneously reported visual confirmation of weapons mounted on the lead craft's foredeck, a twin-rail launcher consistent with a Nasser 1 anti-ship missile system. Hostile intent confirmed on all 3 surface tracks. Recommend weapons free. The captain's response was immediate. Weapons free. Engage in sequence. Lead track first. What happened next took 11 seconds. A single RGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missile launched from the Robert Smalls midships canister bank, turned north, dropped to sea-skimming altitude, and covered the distance to Bondar 1 at 537 miles per hour. The fast attack craft never saw it coming. The Harpoon carried a 488-pound blast fragmentation warhead designed to kill vessels displacing up to 3,000 tons. Bondar 1 displaced approximately 13 tons. The result was not an engagement. It was an erasure. The craft came apart across 200 meters of ocean surface, burning debris scattering in a wide fan that glowed briefly on the Seahawk's infrared camera before the sea swallowed most of it.
Splash Bondar 1.
10 miles to the east, Bondar 3's crew saw the flash on the horizon and understood immediately that the plan was over. Their lead boat was gone. The target was not a logistics ship. The darkness that had been their ally for the last hour now contained something far worse than an unaware victim. The Paycap-class boat heeled hard to starboard and turned northeast at maximum speed, abandoning its flanking run and driving for the nearest Iranian territorial water boundary, 14 miles away. Bondar 2 made a different choice. Whether driven by training, ideology, or the simple inability to process what was happening fast enough to make a rational decision, the crew of the second attack craft maintained course.
They kept coming.
At 52 knots, they were closing the gap to the destroyer at nearly a mile per minute, driving toward a ship that was now fully engaged, fully aware, and fully capable of killing everything on the surface within 30 miles. The tactical action officer tracked Bondar 2's approach without emotion. At 14 nautical miles, the craft crossed into the engagement envelope for the destroyer's 5-inch gun, a Mark 45 Mod 4 naval gun capable of firing GPS-guided rounds at targets 15 miles away with accuracy measured in single meters. The gun mount trained to starboard. Fire control locked. Engage Bondar 2. Gun action. 3 rounds left the barrel in rapid sequence. The first struck the water 30 meters ahead of the craft, a near miss that sent a column of spray over the boat's bow. The second hit the engine compartment. The third was unnecessary, but had already been committed. Bondar 2's forward momentum carried the shattered hull another 200 meters before it settled and began taking water. The Seahawk